It all begins at the rock bottom of a ruined life as dark energy descends into a desolate gorge. Deep within a jagged cavern, our guy kneels suspended by heavy chains in a pool of his own blood, until an unseen entity breaks the silence, addressing the blindfolded captive by his former title. The eldest young master of the Loyang sword house, the broken man can only groan and struggle weakly against his bonds while the voice mocks his futile efforts. He remembers it clearly, the day a torturer stretched out his tongue and severed it with shears. Back in the cavern, blood pours from the mute captive's mouth as the sinister voice establishes a telepathic connection, allowing the young master to desperately question the identity of his tormentor through his inner thoughts. He thrashes frantically in the dark, panicking over his blindness, only for the entity to cruelly remind him of the red-hot skewers that gouged out his eyes. He recalls how the systematic destruction of his body began with his delicate hands, and moved to the graceful legs that had only ever wandered peaceful gardens. His limbs were severed piece by piece while he drifted in and out of consciousness, but even amidst that horrific memory, his blood-stained face twists into a menacing smile. Swirling as a mass of sinister purple energy, the dark entity casually notes how long Yin So-yun has been rotting in this dungeon. But ignoring his own agony, our hero finally asks what became of his family. The voice just mocks this sudden display of concern from a man who spent all this time screaming for his own life. Before delivering a devastating blow, his clan has been completely wiped out. As a massive wave of dark energy surges through the cavern, the entity commands him to remember exactly what he has lost. He remembers how, years ago, his home was reduced to a burning ruin during the brutal extermination of the Loyang sword house, and the entity's voice echoed through the vision, emphasizing the heavy bloody toll of this destruction. His eldest sister was savagely attacked, beaten to death by her own husband, just so the coward could sever ties with their fallen house. The tragic fate then fell upon his second sister, a proud swordswoman, who had her dantian destroyed before being violated and murdered by a pack of lecherous bandits. Chained to the cavern wall, our boy breaks down in agonizing denial, his mind screaming on full blast that he had absolutely zero clue his family was in danger. But a massive pillar of dark energy erupts before him as the unseen voice questions his supposed ignorance. He is forced to recall the bloody aftermath of his departure. After he left to marry into another house, his younger brothers slaughtered each other for power, while he willfully buried himself in books, completely blind to his family destroying itself. Back in the cavern, our hero internally pleads that he was just an ordinary man who couldn't have known. A pathetic excuse, the captor mockingly repeats, expressing deep rumbling frustration at his stubborn denial amidst a surging wave of dark aura. He remembers it clearly. At merely 4 years old, he organized hundreds of complex medical texts for his mother. By 5, he possessed the sheer intellect to petition the emperor with a revolutionary farming method, and at 6 he read the stars to foresee a great drought, saving tens of thousands from starvation. Suspended in the dark cavern, the captive watched the massive demonic entity loom over him, hyping his intellect to the moon and declaring that history's greatest legends were absolute frauds compared to his galaxy-brain genius. It demanded to know if our boy finally remembered the truth of his own capabilities. A reality the defeated captive admitted he already knew without missing a single detail. A vision flashes of him standing atop a jagged peak under an ominous red star as he confesses he was born under the cursed fate of the heavenly killing star. A doom-flagged destiny that forced him to bench himself just to keep the world from drowning in a massive bloodbath. The sinister entity taunts him that his destiny of death has already run its course regardless of his absence. Bowing his bleeding head, the captive resigns himself to the strict shackles of fate, finding a grim resolve to leave everything to the ultimate judgment of the heavens, and expressing a naive faith that karma will inevitably punish the wicked who destroyed his family. But suddenly, a shadowy claw manifests as the entity's dark energy flares to mock this foolish belief. Engulfed in a red aura, the entity angrily challenges the very concept of a benevolent heaven, and prepares to shatter his captive's past illusions by revealing an ancient tale of reality. The dark entity drops a lore dump that plays out like a grim highlight reel. Eons ago, a fiery bird soaring over a mythic mountain range, where devoted sages dedicate their lives to seeking enlightenment and the strict order of karma. They hold a stubborn conviction that the universe is just, and that every evil deed will eventually be met with rightful retribution. But the harsh reality is completely backwards. The wicked just keep committing atrocities and lounging in luxury until they die peacefully in their sleep, while the vast majority of the righteous are exploited and left screaming in despair. Wandering a barren wasteland, an emaciated figure highlights the bleak truth that humanity is born only to suffer, and that death is the ultimate equalizer, reducing both the saint and the sinner to a handful of crumbling dust. A chaotic swirl of shadowy hands reaches up from the dark, declaring the universe's complete indifference to any human concept of justice, until a chained figure engulfed in an explosive pillar of energy roars out the final, agonizing conclusion. that rightful judgment never existed in the first place. Back in the cold reality of the cavern, our boy could only laugh at the bitter truth, that divine judgment and hope were nothing but pathetic lies invented by the desperate. He remembered the massive swirling entity finally making its move to offer him a simple, horrific choice, asking if he wished to turn back time and save everyone, an offer he accepted without a second thought. The unseen captor had warned that the price would be his very soul, condemned to suffer for eternity with no chance of salvation, but missing a tongue wasn't about to stop him. So our guy just gritted his teeth and mentally screamed his desperate acceptance, swearing to seize control of their destinies and rewrite history himself, as the entity welcomed his dark ambition, letting shadowy tendrils completely envelop him to seal the horrific pact. And now here he stands, anchoring the battlefield at the epicenter of his terrifying demonic domain. A single glowing purple eye pierces through the bandages wrapping his face, and he commands the trembling enemies to look upon him, while ominous red chains drag across the corrupted, cracking earth. Our hero takes a slow, deliberate step forward on bare, scarred feet, radiating an overwhelming aura of pure menace. Rewind to that pitch-black cavern where our battered guy slowly approached a deeply cursed, fleshy scripture. Bound in skin and stitched with sinews, the gruesome book had spoken to him of their shared path, and its bloody tendrils had pulsed against the earth to offer a miraculous second chance. With a single glowing purple eye piercing the shadows, our hero had formally surrendered his soul to the artifact. A massive eruption of pink and black energy had instantly swallowed the cavern, and a booming voice hailed him as the fated one. The entity had finally revealed the tome's true name, the Sutra of Vanquishing Darkness and Rending the Heavens, a power designed to devour all evil that washed over him in a terrifying wave of screaming souls. As the glowing book floated open, he recalled it presenting the ultimate choice to judge the wicked and turn back time to save his family. A swirling vortex of energy promised that with his fierce resolve, rewriting history was finally within reach, so he remembered standing barefoot amidst the erupting dark aura. Fully embracing the corruption, he had flashed a confident smile with glowing purple eyes, officially crowned the ruler of darkness and ready to judge all karma in the world. A blinding pillar of light erupts over the Wangak pavilion, where our boy Yin So-yun lies unconscious, radiating a mystical aura, until he suddenly springs upright, gasping for air as cold sweat drips down his face. He looks around, completely disoriented, taking in the wooden shelves and scattered scrolls before the impossible realization hits him. He's back in his old quarters. Stepping barefoot onto the floorboards, my guy realizes the dark entity actually kept its promise. Staring into the glass, the reality of the situation finally settles in. He has actually regressed to February of his 17th year, right before the brutal tragedies began. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a voice drifting in from the courtyard, casually mocking the so-called eldest young master of the Loyang sword house. Our hero stands perfectly still, listening to the servants gossip about his pathetic state, and laugh about how his former reputation for brilliance was nothing but an empty rumor. As their insults bleed through the walls, he realizes his senses have become supernaturally sharp, completely bypassing the pavilion's elite soundproofing. But it isn't just his hearing. A terrifying dark aura begins to violently swirl around his very being. He remembers it clearly. Earlier that morning, he had stood alone to examine his newly enhanced physique, and the overwhelming surge of strength flowing through his veins was the undeniable power of the scripture of shaking the heavens by suppressing darkness. But the reflection staring back at him was soaked in pure killing intent, looking exactly like a monstrous demonic human, so he had to stand there and practice his smile just to fake a convincing human expression. Back in the present, he pauses, letting that exact same confident smile stretch across his face. He muses on what it even means to be human anymore, deciding that since his reflection looks decent enough, it's time to get this show on the road. With that, our boy takes his first bare steps forward. He remembers pushing open the heavy wooden doors to step outside, closing his eyes as a fresh breeze washed over him, and walking barefoot through the sunlit courtyard, strolling right past a pair of sweeping servants who immediately bowed to greet the eldest young master. The other bystanders were completely caught off guard by the sight of him actually out in the bright daylight, whispering to each other about his strange, out-of-it behavior, but So-yun just smiled, enjoying the gentle warmth as it chased away the bitter cold of the darkness. He fully embraced that serene light, until one of the senior staff disrespectfully barked at him to gather all the pavilion's subordinates. The sheer audacity of the order left the rest of the servants stunned, but as they slowly filtered into the courtyard, their shock quickly gave way to restless murmurs. They openly complained about having their naps interrupted, mocking our guy right to his face as the useless, swordless failure of the Loyang sword house, and their annoyance only peaked when he just stood before them in total silence. Finally breaking the tension, So-yun calmly asked if everyone was present, turning his head to fix the crowd with an icy stare before abruptly declaring that every single one of them was fired from the Wangak pavilion. The young master ordered the entire staff to pack up and report to the chief steward's office for reassignment, a bombshell that instantly sent the mob into a furious uproar. They vehemently rejected the command, terrified that being cast out like this would completely ruin their reputations. In his original life, our boy had been foolish enough to believe that showing goodwill would earn him the same in return, and he had desperately clung to the naive hope that his sincerity would eventually reach them. But now a sinister chuckle bubbles up from the young master's throat instead. The eerie sound sends a chill straight through the panicked bystanders, and as a dark purple aura bleeds into the air, So-Yun throws his head back and laughs like an absolute maniac. He remembers how he calmly called for their attention, asking the nervous men a very simple question: who was he? When they stammered out his title as the eldest young master, he flashed a chilling smile and asked if their blatant insubordination meant they thought they ran the house. The mere word strikes terror into the rebellious servant's heart, and he feels as though a massive pale hand is slashing across his chest, his legs trembling uncontrollably as he throws himself to the ground to desperately beg for mercy. The rest of the staff quickly followed suit, dropping to the dirt to plead for their families until So-Yun simply put a finger to his lips and chillingly silenced the courtyard. The entire group submitted in absolute fear, and as he looked down at them, our boy realized just how easy it was to command obedience through terror. A cunning smile crept across his face, satisfied that he had successfully cleared away all the unnecessary spies, before he coldly told the men he wouldn't hold them accountable for their lack of discipline. But he still ordered them to pack their things and get the hell out of his sight, which the banished men tearfully accepted as absolute mercy. Before the courtyard completely cleared, he turned to a sweating subordinate and commanded him to tell the chief steward to send exactly one child to serve as his new attendant. As the terrified men scrambled to carry out his will, So-Yun calmly raised his hand to the sky, marveling at the bizarre glowing red light pulsing from his skin. Our hero stares up at the daylight, lamenting that despite the warmth on his face, the sun has already turned its back on him. And from the depths of his soul, a commanding voice officially declares that he will now breathe in the shadows, strike down the wicked, and reign as the venerable one of darkness. Meanwhile, in a completely different part of the estate, a messenger kneels on an ornate red carpet to deliver an urgent report. A shadowy superior listens in dead silence as he learns that his carefully placed spies inside the Wangak pavilion have just been completely wiped out. The surrounding subordinates bow deeply, suffocating in the sudden heavy tension, before the unseen master erupts in a murderous red-eyed rage, screaming that a worthless bug dares to ruin his plans. Cutting over to the chief steward's office, the man himself sits at his desk with his hands clasped, realizing a day he long anticipated has finally arrived. He ponders how a young master who showed absolutely no interest in worldly affairs for a decade could suddenly wake up and purge his entire staff. Years ago, he had watched the young So-Yun take a martial stance and swing his blade with such immense force that the sheer power generated a massive explosive shockwave. The steward and his attendants had stood there in absolute awe, realizing the kid had already reached the profound realm of a swordmaster. He contemplates whether the time to just sit back and watch has passed, but his thoughts are cut short as a young woman formally greets him from the doorway. He calls Jung-Ah closer, his expression dead serious as he states he has an urgent matter to discuss, and she steps up to the desk to receive her orders. He remembers it clearly. He had told Jung-Ah he always valued her highly, revealing that the Sword House's succession was about to drastically shift, with the eldest young master right at the center of the storm. He had offered her the choice to infiltrate the Wangak pavilion, and she had clenched her fist, resolutely accepting his orders. Armed with her striking golden eyes, Jung-Ah is now officially tasked with uncovering our hero's true, hidden intentions. Arriving at the grand gates of the Wangak pavilion, Jung-Ah steps up to her new assignment, immediately struck by the sheer scale of the eldest young master's residence. Just a few days ago, the chief steward had advised her that a family's true power could be gauged simply by looking at their main gate. Back in the present, she is quickly underwhelmed to find the estate's guards dozing off in the dirt, but as she steps closer, her demeanor completely shifts. Her golden eyes flare to life, revealing that these seemingly lazy men are actually hidden experts radiating powerful auras. Back then, she had formally introduced herself as the new attendant, a role she played with strict, unwavering authority. The memory fades as she watches a scarred guard casually yawn and order the men to let her pass, internally noting their lack of security. But as the heavy wooden doors groan open, she steps forward into her new assignment, greeted by a bright sunlit forest path. The gatekeeper had previously issued a stern warning that under no circumstances was she to step off the trail. The peaceful illusion shatters as heavy footsteps echo from the shadows, making Jung-Ah quickly realize this is no ordinary stroll through the woods. Staring up at the towering canopy, her glowing golden eyes pierce the veil to reveal the terrifying truth. The entire forest is actually a massive, high-density formation, radiating a pressure so oppressive it feels like it could crush her like an insect. and as she cautiously navigates the treacherous path, an unseen observer trails just behind her, noting her complete lack of internal energy, and wondering how a seemingly powerless maid can perceive the pavilion's hidden barrier. Our boy just stands in the shadows like a literal final boss and watches her flinch, but sensing the sudden shift in the air, Jung-ah whips around and spots a mysterious figure stepping effortlessly through the ethereal light. His face completely obscured by a glowing aura, the man asks how she is able to see him, flashing a slight smile as he calls her peculiar, which leaves the maid frozen in absolute shock. Suddenly her vision violently warps, reflecting a dark silhouette with glowing yellow eyes as the bright forest is instantly swallowed by a pitch-black void, and a monstrous face illuminated by an eerie blue light flashes before her, leaving her gasping for air as she plunges waist-deep into freezing dark water, watching in pure horror as shadowy hands begin to emerge from the abyss. Faceless victims are violently dragged screaming into the murky depths, and she feels herself being grabbed and pulled down right along with them. Only a single hand is left reaching up for salvation, but just as a lethal strike approaches, a pale hand effortlessly intercepts it. In reality, the crushing weight of that terrifying presence has caused Jung-ah to completely black out, slumping forward right into Yin So-yun's arms. And looking down at the unconscious girl, our hero calmly notes that the chief steward has sent him a very interesting child. Sometime later, Jung-ah rests peacefully in a sunlit room, waking up disoriented and pulling back the heavy blankets. She takes a moment to marvel at the modest yet elegant traditional space, and as she steps out of bed onto the wooden floor, her eyes land on a stack of open books detailing medicinal roots and pressure points. Intrigued, Jung-ah picks one up and starts skimming, but her golden eyes widen as she realizes these are priceless texts on national medicine and lost sword arts. And when she slowly turns to the towering bookshelves behind her, a cold sweat breaks out on her neck at the terrifying realization that this room holds knowledge meant only for the imperial palace. That awe is suddenly interrupted by a strange sensation from outside, and as she pushes open the wooden lattice doors, she is instantly captivated by a flurry of falling petals. The pavilion overlooks a serene, sunlit landscape, and she marvels at the unnatural spring-like warmth in the dead of winter, until our hero casually steps into view to ask if she slept well, leaving her flustered by the eldest young master's calm presence as she blushes and eagerly stammers out a reply, a quiet moment that carries over into the evening as the sun dips below the traditional roofline. Sitting across from her, our guy casually mentions that she was actually pretty heavy when he carried her, which immediately triggers her mortifying memory of passing out in the woods. Before he can even finish recounting how she completely swooned into his arms, she frantically cuts him off, blushing furiously as she spins a wild lie about how she was actually the one who found him collapsed and saved his life. Doubling down on the performance, the attendant drops to her knees to formally pledge her lifelong devotion, but the eldest young master coldly rejects her self-appointed servitude, tossing the chief steward's scroll onto the floor, making it crystal clear he doesn't take orders from his own subordinates, and leaving the panicked girl prostrating on the wood to beg for forgiveness. Once, long before any of this, our boy had gone through the trouble of rescuing a woman who immediately turned around and asked him to kill her, and in that previous timeline she had pledged her absolute loyalty to him with those exact same striking golden eyes. A melancholic smile crosses our hero's face as he reflects on the tragic irony of it all. Fully recognizing those striking irises as the mark of the infamous golden-eyed witch. Deciding to test her resolve, he leans in close and asks if she knows how to cook, and when she looks up in total bewilderment, he just smiles and confirms the order, until soon enough a crackling fire is lit in the hearth. Jung-ah finds herself stuck sitting in a rustic kitchen, bitterly lamenting that she was put to manual labor just because she passed out, and as she tends the flames, that terrifying cracked visage from her hallucination flashes right back in front of her. Sweating and shaken, she tries to brush the overwhelming dread off as a bad nightmare, slapping her own cheeks hard to snap out of the daze, and getting to work chopping vegetables, deeply unsettled by how easily the supposedly weak eldest young master shattered her flawless self-control. Our boy had watched her chop vegetables in a much more peaceful life. They shared a warm domestic dynamic, and he'd playfully tease her about the dinner menu, which made the golden-eyed witch blush and shyly agree. Jung-ah lays out a massive feast for the eldest young master, but instead of digging in alone, he tells her to grab a seat. She hesitates for a second, so he drops a firm command and makes the attendant obediently join him at the table. He'd offered her a bite from a shared dish, though she'd hesitated, feeling it was entirely improper to eat before her master, but he had gently insisted, watching as she quietly tasted the food to confirm it was delicious, which convinced him to finally dig in himself and warmly praise her simple, perfectly infused flavors. As our hero polishes off his bowl, casually holding it out for a refill, he happily devours serving after serving, with the night deepening over the quiet estate as he repeatedly asks for more, until the attendant finally admits the rice is completely gone, leaving him to set his chopsticks down and excuse himself with a lingering hunger. Jung-ah offers to brew a pot of tea, but he turns her down and asks for liquor instead, retreating to the roof ledge alone under the pale moonlight, where our guy tries to make sense of the bottomless void in his stomach. He actually smirks, convinced that a massive appetite is a hilariously cheap price for a dark pack that literally rewrites history, until that smug confidence shatters as giant, shadowy claws suddenly clamp over his face, hissing about fate, while a thick, suffocating aura bleeds into the night. The dark entity's grotesque face materializes right beside his ear to whisper that the hour has arrived, prompting him to step forward with dark energy radiating from his stride, and with a manic, jagged grin, Yin So-yun fully embraces his demonic persona, charging into the night for a midnight feast. The night is young in Loyang, but the local tavern is already packed to the rafters, leaving a wealthy patron in a blue robe to argue with the frantic innkeeper over a supposedly empty seat he spotted from the door. Ignoring the staff's desperate protests, the man pushes his way straight into the dining area. But as he approaches the table, he freezes dead in his tracks, his eyes widening in absolute horror at the sight before him. Years ago, a grotesque symphony of tearing meat and snapping bones filled the air, as a younger So-yun tore into a massive feast like a starved beast. But no matter how much our boy consumed, the maddening hunger gnawing at his soul refused to fade, projecting a terrifying aura of insatiable appetite that completely paralyzed everyone in the room. Onlookers trembled violently on the floor, whispering that a hungry ghost had crawled straight out of hell, a fear that finally broke an elder in a teal robe into screaming panic as the demonic presence suffocated the hall. Yet amidst all the chaos, the starving figure could only sit in the dirt and mutter that it still wasn't enough. Back in the present, our hero abruptly pushes back from the table, a thick purple aura bleeding off his frame. His pale eyes are dead cold, and as he turns toward the exit, his massive shadow stretches across the walls with an oppressive weight. The whole tavern falls completely silent, the patrons too terrified to even draw a breath as he passes. Just moments earlier, our boy had calmly asked the sweating innkeeper for his bill, nearly giving the poor man a heart attack just by opening his mouth, before flashing an eerie smile and tossing a heavy sack of coins onto the counter. The second he stepped outside, the trembling staff scrambled to throw salt on the threshold to ward off the evil spirit. Back out under the moonlight, our boy realizes the grim truth. Even after that ungodly feast, he feels like he's plummeting into an endless abyss of starvation, shaking his head to clear the creeping dread. But then a distinct metallic scent catches his attention. His eyes flare with a sinister purple glow as a manic grin spreads across his face, because to his new demonic senses the stench of blood and violence is absolutely delicious. Down in a nearby alleyway, the sickening sound of flesh meeting bone echoes through the night, as the very same innkeeper from earlier gets absolutely bodied, sent flying backward to slam hard against the cobblestones. Just a few hours ago, he was cornered by thugs from the notorious Blackbone sect, where he desperately protested their absurd extortion, screaming that 10 times the principal in interest was a sick joke, only for an enforcer to brutally stomp on his hand and silence his cries with a sickening crunch. The leader of the group ordered his men to simply take their victim's identity plaque, and as a pale hand snatched the wooden tag from the dirt, the cruel extortionist gloated that this single piece of wood was enough to sell off the shop, the man's wife and his kids. The beaten innkeeper clung to his tormentor's legs to beg for his family's safety, but the gang only laughed, delivering a barrage of violent kicks to the defenseless man as they mocked his worthless life. The Blackbone sect leader is just contemplating what to do with the beaten man, when an eerie whistling cuts through the alley. His thugs immediately look around in alarm, screaming for the unseen intruder to show their face, but the sound only intensifies, carrying a physical weight that brings the bald lackey to his knees in agony. A freezing, unnatural darkness begins to bleed into the street, prompting the boss to bark at his men to shut up. Sweat pours down his face as he realizes the sheer pressure of this aura can only belong to a high-level expert, so he swallows his pride and throws up a nervous martial salute, asking if the hidden master has business with them. Behind him, his men draw their weapons to brace against the swirling black mist, while their leader just gulps, his heart hammering against his ribs. Trembling, the thug leader respectfully begs the unseen master to show himself, and a single footstep echoes from the shadows as Yin So-yun steps into the light, his eyes glowing a piercing purple amidst a storm of dark aura. The extortionist can only stare in absolute terror at the smiling demon before them, but our hero just flashes his sharp fangs, casually mentioning that he followed a delicious smell right to this exact spot. Before the crew can even process the threat, he vanishes, instantly reappearing directly in the face of one of the goons, who completely panics and desperately scrambles to draw his sword. But my guy just effortlessly clamps a hand over the thug's wrist, his smile locked in place, and with a sickening tear he completely rips the arm off. The man screams in agony as his severed limb hits the alley floor in a spray of blood, while the rest of the crew can only watch the mutilation in paralyzed horror. Before they can run, the team grabs their leader and drags him into a vortex of dark energy. He revels in the carnage, his awakened instincts treating their despair like a fine meal, until the entire alleyway is swallowed by deep shadows as his true power bleeds into reality. A towering blood-stained shadow entity erupts behind our boy, unleashing massive dark hands that violently crush the faces of the trapped thugs as the alley becomes a freezing vortex of purple energy. But when he spots two stragglers trying to slip away, that manic smile only widens. The men sprint for their lives, screaming about a monster, yet no matter how fast their legs carry them, that suffocating aura stays right on their heels, a colossal predator just toying with its food before the final bite. The bald thug is completely paralyzed, sweat pouring down his scarred face as a bloody hand smears against the nearby wall, and his comrade's mind entirely shatters under the horror of the massacre. Snapping out of his stupor, the thug scrambles desperately away from the gore, screaming his lungs out as the chaotic thuds of bodies dropping echo right behind him. He throws his weight against a closed wooden door and pounds frantically on the timber for anyone to save him, finally breaking down in tears to beg the monster why, out of all the scum in the world, they have to die. Our boy just looms over the cowering man, drenched in blood and radiating pure demonic energy. Leaning in close with a jagged smile, he whispers a chilling promise that this slaughter is only the beginning. And as a terrifying dark visage fully manifests in the shadows, the ruler of darkness claims his very first meal. But as the last of the thug's screams fade into the night, So-yun's consciousness is suddenly pulled away and he awakens on a cold, rocky surface. Sitting up, he rubs his head, remembering he was just outside the inn, when a sudden rattling echoes through the darkness. The cavern around him is filled with ancient stone coffins, and as their heavy lids begin to shift, our guy deduces he's been pulled into some sort of underground tomb. A skeletal creature with a glowing pink eye lunges from the shadows, but he just calmly strolls past the growling monsters, way more curious about how they were made than afraid of their teeth. As he steps deeper into the purple-hued abyss, an unseen voice praises his composure and recognizes him as the fated master of the dark scripture. The shadows part to reveal a withered old man with glowing eyes and an ominous aura, but So-yun is completely unfazed, casually noting that the entity's voice sounds like mold is growing in his throat. Instead of getting angry, the creepy elder just laughs and admits the insult is spot on. Our boy doesn't stop there, immediately mocking the old man's rotting teeth and terrible oral hygiene, which just makes that cracked face twist into a sinister smile as he declares that the more he looks at this arrogant kid, the more he likes him. The elder notes that the demonic artifact has finally found a proper master and bursts into manic laughter, claiming he's never seen anyone quite like him. Moments ago in the vision, the monstrous figure leaned in to question what the young man actually knew about the power he wielded. So-yun explained that the scripture of shaking the heavens was an ancient demonic artifact capable of distorting time itself, a heaven-defying text woven from the very skin and blood of three immortals. But since his knowledge ended there, he respectfully bowed and asked the hooded elder for teachings. The entity's glowing red eye narrows, observing that most fated ones who arrive here react with either blind arrogance or sheer madness. Sitting cross-legged amidst the dark flames, he notes that this young man is entirely different, and our boy just stares back calmly as he notices the entity's tone suddenly shift to one of genuine respect. With a chilling smile, the elder makes a surprising admission. Even he doesn't truly understand the dark scripture. He explains that while legends claim mad immortals flayed their own bodies to create the text, its true origins remain a complete mystery. And he would know because he himself is an immortal. He looks up into the void with a profound sense of loss and quickly corrects himself. He was an immortal, but has now fallen so far he is nothing more than dust. So-yun listens in absolute silence as the tragic confession hangs heavy in the air. Eons ago, the elder had spent countless years studying the demonic artifact, driven by a helpless, consuming obsession to uncover its secrets. Yet despite his endless studies, he still couldn't understand it, proving just how incomprehensible this power truly was. He had watched countless brilliant prodigies attempt to master the artifact, only to be devoured by it in the end. But pointing a withered finger, the old man smiles sinisterly, claiming he sees a glimmer of hope in our hero because he has already completed the initiation rite. Bathed in a soft purple light, So-yun is completely lost, asking what kind of rite he's talking about, until the monstrous figure leans in, his single visible eye glowing red as he chillingly asks if the boy hadn't already devoured them. The horrifying realization finally clicks into place, leaving the teen standing in stunned silence. He remembers the previous night clearly, standing in that blood-soaked alleyway enveloped in dark energy. He listened to the sinister voice explain that consuming evil people was the only way to awaken the scripture's true power. The utterly abhorrent act had completely erased his demonic hunger, replacing his agonizing starvation with a twisted sense of fullness. It was exactly as the hooded figure had solemnly declared. Feasting on the wicked was the core, inescapable demand of the Dark Pact. Back in the present, the old man explains that this heaven-defying power was meant to burn away the world's darkness on behalf of an indifferent heaven. But as the vision shifts to his shadowy manifestation grabbing a bloody attacker, the entity clarifies that devouring the wicked isn't just a physical act. The giant hands that engulf the victim's face are actually hungry ghosts bound to the scripture, designed to drag his enemies down into the pitch-black abyss of his demonic domain. Suddenly, the elder's scarred face looms in the void to announce that their time is up. He wishes So-Yun a good hunt before fading away, and as the underground tomb begins to violently rumble and collapse, the dark vision shatters entirely, instantly replaced by the bright, peaceful exterior of the Wanguk Pavilion. Over the past few days, Jang-Ah had reflected on her time serving our boy as she stood outside his room to announce she had brought tea. When he dismissively ordered her to leave the tray by the door, she obediently complied, noting that his quarters were a total minefield littered with priceless martial arts manuals. She knew that if she dared to peek at even a single page, he would likely disappear without a trace. Then there was his eccentric behavior, like the morning he cheerfully prepared to cook breakfast, handling a wok with surprising skill while she watched in confusion. He had even forced her to sit at the same dining table, smiling warmly as he insisted that they would always eat together from now on. She hesitated, citing her lowly status, but he bluntly told her to just eat. He then showed her a crude drawing, brushing aside all formal boundaries, which left her bewildered as she realized he had absolutely zero romantic interest in her. This was a massive relief, as her exceptional beauty had always drawn dangerous attention, especially from the sinister second and third young masters, who were notorious for making women vanish without a trace. So our guy's complete indifference was literally keeping her alive. Earlier today, she had been quietly kneeling in the pavilion when the scarred guard, Gyu, urgently approached the young master. She fiercely scolded the man for interrupting the peaceful meal, but she snapped to her feet when he awkwardly announced they had an unexpected guest. He explained that a warrior from the main house had just shown up, causing her to freeze, fully aware that these were the direct forces of the third young master. The scarred guard relays the warrior's official demand to hand the new attendant over. The chief steward notes that a dangerous turf war has clearly sparked between the younger brothers, but an indignant Jang-Ah immediately pulls rank to question how a mere grunt dares to bark orders at the eldest young master's personal maid. Gyu sweats under the pressure, defending that he couldn't exactly tell the third young master's men to kick rocks. Their bickering is cut short when our guy slams his hand onto the table, ordering the guard to go see what the guest actually wants. A sudden display of authority that catches the golden-eyed girl completely off guard. The young master just calmly flips a page in his book and dismissively tells his subordinate to go handle the noise, deeply annoyed internally by his younger brother's arrogant attempt to bypass proper protocol. Jang-Ah respectfully bows and excuses herself to let him deal with the disrespect, but before Gyu can even turn for the door, our hero suddenly calls him out, leaving the scarred man pointing at himself in absolute confusion, as So-Yun sternly demands to know who gave him permission to just waltz in unannounced, which prompts the sweating massive guard to immediately stammer out a nervous excuse about the usual messenger missing after yesterday's servant purge. Rewind to earlier today, when Yin So-Yun had completely roasted the scarred guard for slipping past the entrance, sarcastically asking if an empty post meant he could just waltz in however he pleased. Gyu had bowed so deeply he nearly folded in half to apologize for the breach in protocol, but looking down at the towering fighter, our boy declared he would forgive him just this once, on the condition that he takes over as the front gate messenger indefinitely. The sudden demotion had left the fierce escort completely stunned. So-Yun strictly restricts the new gatekeeper's access to everywhere except the living quarters. Flashing a smug smile, he dares the scarred guard to disobey if he has a problem with it. Frustrated but utterly intimidated, Gyu begrudgingly accepts his new reality, and as our hero casually shoos him away, the annoyed subordinate shuffles out the door, realizing he's just been thoroughly put in his place. Meanwhile, a brand new headache arrives at the pavilion gates. Jang-Ah politely steps up to intercept the angry guest, who loudly announces himself as the warrior of the three absolutes and demands an audience with our boy. But when she firmly states that So-Yun isn't taking visitors, the arrogant swordsman snaps, drawing his blade with a furious shout to strike down the insolent maid. Jang-Ah doesn't even flinch, and her golden eyes only widen when a bright shockwave erupts right in front of her. The scarred subordinate intercepts the lethal downward strike with his own sword, stepping protectively in front of her to coldly cite strict security protocols. The attacker curses at the guard to get out of his way, but the scarred man's eye just glows a menacing red as a dark aura bleeds from his body. A few days ago, the older swordsman had frozen mid-shout during a previous visit, suddenly realizing that this supposedly demoted gatekeeper was actually a terrifyingly dangerous expert. Swallowing his pride, the warrior had nervously backed down. He had shifted his focus back to Jang-Ah and demanded she accompany him to the third young master. Back in the present, Jang-Ah flatly shuts the warrior down, making it crystal clear her fate isn't his lord's to decide, and the man sneers at her defiance, delivering a sleazy threat that his lord expects his new property to remain completely unused before turning to storm off. But the drama isn't over, as the departing warrior bumps shoulders with another arrival, and with an annoyed grunt the steward of the lake garden brushes past him to approach the steps. The elder formally introduces himself as the steward of the lake garden, a direct representative of the second young master. He rudely shoves a document into Jung-ah's chest and demands to be taken inside, but she stands her ground, repeating that our boy is not receiving guests. The steward insists on delivering the letter personally, until the scarred guard steps up to back her up, forcing the old man to settle for leaving it with the maid. With the envelope handed over, the steward leaves them with an ominous warning. The steward leans in close, reminding Jung-ah that whatever she's plotting, she is ultimately just a pawn in the second young master's palm. As the elder departs, the scarred guard turns a suspicious eye toward her, pointing out that So-yun never actually gave an official order forbidding visitors, and bluntly asking if she's acting on her own to prove her loyalty or just trying to protect herself. He wonders aloud why our hero didn't just turn the guests away himself if he wanted privacy before walking off and leaving her to deliver the sinister letter to their lord. A few days ago, she had reflected on being sold to the sword house, a bitter memory that still haunted her. She realizes with a sinking feeling that she's never truly understood what absolute loyalty means. A few days ago, she had treated her relationship with our hero as purely transactional, like the time she handed him a formal document, only for him to casually toss it away and let it burn to ash in the brazier without a second glance. She steps into his study to present the second young master's sinister letter, but So-yun barely even acknowledges it. She anxiously explains that the message is likely about her whereabouts, asking if he's really going to ignore a direct missive from his own brother. Our boy doesn't even look up from his book, calmly replying that if it were truly important, the sender would have come in person. When she stammers out her confusion, he bluntly asks why she didn't just open it herself, criticizing her lack of initiative and coldly stating that if she actually cared, she should have checked the contents beforehand. Sweating bullets, Jung-ah frantically denies daring to pry into his private affairs, a defense that pulls her into a memory from a few days ago where she had braced for punishment only for So-yun to just smile and calmly suggest they share some tea instead. She had asked for permission to drink with him, and he had complimented the brew's aroma as they sat together. A seemingly gentle memory that carried a hidden, chilling meaning, since our boy had always made her take the very first bite of any meal they shared. The painful truth washes over her. They weren't sharing those meals out of kindness. He was using her to test for poison, trusting her just as little as everyone else. Hurt but resolute, she abruptly stands up to formally address him, confessing that she took it upon herself to turn away the earlier guests without his permission. Back then, Jung-ah confessed she'd been acting like a galaxy-brain genius while totally missing the bigger picture. Her desperate need to survive had completely clouded her judgment, so she had dropped to her knees and asked if he would still accept her absolute devotion even now. So-yun quietly contemplates her words, asking if she can truly pledge herself to him no matter what dark truth she uncovers. Without a shred of hesitation, Jung-ah says yes. Testing her resolve, our boy asks what she knows about his father, the Grand Patriarch, and when she recites the official story of his illness, he drops the grim reality that the man is actually comatose from poison. He explains that he's faced constant assassination attempts since childhood, which is why he had to lock down his own food supply just to stay alive. Jung-ah is completely overwhelmed by the sheer, mind-bending scale of the danger our boy is casually navigating, recalling how just moments ago he had warned her that this was just a fraction of the sword house's darkness, asking one last time if she truly wished to serve him. Without hesitation, she had bowed deeply to the floor to beg for a place at his side, and to seal the pact he had handed her a hidden letter. As she read the final page, her blood had run cold because it was a direct order from the chief steward himself, stating that if she failed to submit, she was to be quietly killed. The betrayal absolutely shatters her, since the man was like a father to her. Our hero calmly takes a sip of his tea and asks if she understands why he showed her that death warrant. Wiping her tears, she bashfully acknowledges him as her true master, and she realizes that by revealing the ugly truth, he was showing her what genuine loyalty actually looks like. Rewind to a few days ago, when our guy cynically wrote off the entire concept of loyalty as straight-up madness, asking her one last time if she was truly willing to walk that mad path by his side, and she had simply smiled, swearing her absolute devotion to her one and only master. Our boy flashes a serene smile, finally accepting her absolute devotion. Back at the Wanguk Pavilion, with her absolute loyalty now pledged to our boy, Jung-ah finally opens up about the tragic history that brought her to his door. In a bitter memory, she recalls how years ago, she lived a happy life with her father and older sister, running a prosperous merchant guild without a single care in the world. Back in the present, she explains that the warm illusion shattered when the guild hit hard times and was forced to take a predatory loan from Yama's debt, a vicious trap with spiraling interest rates that ultimately forced her desperate father to sell both his daughters to different families just to survive. When our guy asks how her sibling fits into all this, Jung-ah reveals that she's now a highly capable information broker who operates right here in Loyang. This immediately catches his attention, especially when she adds that her sister recently tracked down the exact man responsible for their ruin. Her golden eyes glow with pure hatred as she spits out the bastard's name, Jiamjul. Our hero instantly recognizes the alias, confirming the older sibling's profession, and without missing a beat he declares they'll head out to Loyang tomorrow to meet her in person, a casual decision that completely blindsides the maid, her face lighting up with joy at the prospect of a reunion. He generously tells her to take all the time she needs to catch up, so by the next morning she presents herself in her best clothes, fully ready for the trip. But my guy takes one look at her plain attire and harshly criticizes it as unfit for the personal maid of the eldest young master, immediately barking for his newly appointed gatekeeper. The scarred warrior grumbles about the demeaning title, but the young master just ignores the complaints and orders him to march straight to the inner house to fetch the highest quality women's clothes they have in stock, leaving the escort bristling at being treated like a common errand boy. Our guy just leans in close and cheerfully threatens to demote him to the pavilion's official dung carrier if he disobeys. Thoroughly intimidated, the warrior stammers out a panicked agreement, and So-yun watches in mild amusement as the man leaps away through the courtyard gate. The escort clears the roof tiles with his high-speed footwork, fuming internally about his wasted talents and resolving to endure this humiliating post until his official transfer comes through. Unfortunately, he soon returns empty-handed, annoyed to report that the inner house flat-out refused the request, prompting Jung-ah to nervously suggest they just take the L and hit the road since they're already running late. So-yun had ignored her and casually reached into his robe sleeve, suddenly remembering a little trinket he forgot he had on him, and without a word of warning, he had whipped it out and slammed the heavy golden seal directly onto his gatekeeper's forehead. The poor guy had been completely bewildered to find the words "Greatest Sword Under Heaven" stamped in bright ink right across his skin, and his master had simply ordered him to march that face straight back to the inner house. Snapping back to the present, our hero kicks the stunned man while he's down and barks at him to hurry up and run. Jung-ah stares at the object in absolute disbelief as So-yun smugly waves the family head's official golden seal in the air. She demands to know how he got his hands on such a sacred relic, and he confidently points out that with his father comatose, he is the only one with the authority to hold it. The seal is a gift from a past emperor, a rare artifact symbolizing absolute command over the entire Loyang sword house, but our guy casually admits he uses it for mundane chores like buying books and brushes just to force the stubborn servants to cooperate. The poor maid is left completely speechless by his flippant attitude towards the clan's ultimate symbol of power, but the unhinged flex works flawlessly, forcing the inner house steward Wu Huayan to personally march over and deliver the luxury goods. So-yun had smugly chided her for not just cooperating from the start, leaving the steward trembling with suppressed rage as she had forced a stiff, polite retreat. With a massive stockpile of luxury supplies now secured, Jung-ah had stepped out in a beautiful new outfit, though she had felt the fine silks were far too extravagant for her station, until our hero had firmly told her that as he began his campaign she would need to dress the part of his right hand. Accepting his logic, she had obediently fallen in line, and the trio had finally made their way into the massive bustling streets of Loyang. As they had strolled through the city, the trio had immediately drawn the attention of the locals, who couldn't help but admire Jung-ah's beauty before catching sight of her seriously intimidating escort. Recognizing the dreaded uniform of the Loyang sword house, the bystanders had wisely decided to keep their distance, leaving the scarred guard free to scold the girl for wandering too far ahead. He had bitterly complained about his massive downgrade from an elite warrior to a glorified babysitter, but his rant had been cut completely short when our hero had casually announced that he was leaving them behind. He had tasked the exasperated swordsman with keeping her safe, and before the man could even process the ridiculous order, the young master had completely vanished into thin air. Realizing he had just lost his VIP, the panicked escort had cursed under his breath and told Jung-ah she was on her own, though she had just smiled reassuringly, urging him to prioritize their lord since she was more than capable of protecting herself. Utterly frustrated by his boss's impossible speed, the guard had violently pushed off the ground and launched himself across the estate rooftops to track him down. The scarred guard comes to a dead stop on a high roof, completely baffled by the vanishing act. Even with the guard's internal energy fully circulating, our boy has slipped away without a single trace, leaving the elite warrior to deeply question just who the hell he's really escorting. Earlier tonight, while his guard searched the rooftops, our boy had already reached his destination, where the heavy wooden doors of a humble home slowly creaked open, and as he stepped inside, a familiar voice greeted him. The beaten innkeeper he'd saved just hours ago stood there, warmly welcoming the young master into his shabby abode. But the peaceful illusion suddenly shifted, replaying the exact moment the man and his wife first returned to their courtyard, and froze in absolute shock. His bruised face twisted in fury as he realized the Black-Bone sect thugs had ransacked this place too, and panic set in as he sprinted forward to desperately call out for his family, until his terror finally melted into pure relief when he found his wife and 2 children completely unharmed. Tears streamed down the beaten man's face as he pulled his kids into a desperate hug, a fragile reunion watched silently from the shadows by our hero. But the tender moment broke when the innkeeper's wife suddenly noticed the imposing figure standing in their courtyard, and completely misunderstanding the situation, she dropped to her knees to beg the young master for mercy, desperately pleading with him to spare her husband's limbs so they could somehow pay the interest. The battered father quickly rushed over to gently correct her panic, explaining that this scholar wasn't a collector at all, but the great benefactor who had just saved his life, which prompted the relieved mother to wipe her tears and bow so deeply her forehead nearly brushed the dirt. The father and son quickly followed suit, offering their utmost respect to the silent young master, before the scarred innkeeper humbly invited him inside to show even a fraction of his gratitude with a simple cup of tea. Despite his usual cold demeanor, our boy politely accepted the offer, stepping into the humble home where his host nervously poured out a cheap brew, apologizing profusely that it might offend a noble's refined palate. But So Yun just took a calm sip and complimented the warm aroma to put the man at ease. As they sat together amidst the wreckage of the shop, the father asked how he could ever possibly repay this massive life debt, but the scholar just waved the gratitude away and pivoted straight to business, asking about the Black-Bone sect. The battered man explained that the thugs who nearly killed him were contracted by that very syndicate, a brutal underworld group led by a ruthless woman named Jiamju. The innkeeper described the organization as a massive, terrifying syndicate that sank its claws into every single place that smelled of money, so our hero leaned in to ask why a humble artisan was dragged into their illegal gambling dens in the first place. He already knew their dirty tactics. They forced desperate borrowers to gamble just to artificially inflate their debt past the legal interest limits, a loophole that bypassed the very laws he himself had helped author in his past life. Swirling his tea, So Yun pressed the man for any specific intel on Jiamju or her father, but the bruised host just hung his head in defeat, since lowly commoners couldn't possibly know the inner workings of such monsters. The scholar closed his eyes and calmly accepted the limitation. With his questions answered, he stood up and thanked the family for their hospitality before preparing to head out. But the host refused to let him go so easily, begging for the young master's name so they could properly repay him, while the rest of the family gathered around to earnestly insist they weren't shameless enough to let their savior walk away empty-handed. Our guy just quietly scanned the ruined workshop, until his gaze landed on a plain, unfinished white mask glowing faintly among the debris. He stepped lightly across the floorboards and scooped up the crude carving, declaring that all debts of gratitude were now officially settled, a choice that made the innkeeper gasp in absolute shock. The beaten man quickly clarified that he wasn't the one who carved that particular piece, pointing out the glaring lack of eye holes in its crude, unfinished surface. He warned that it was the very last thing his father made before dying, a cursed item he was just about to throw away. Intrigued, our boy held the eyeless mask up to the light, bluntly asking what could have possibly been going through a madman's head to create something so bizarre. And with a sly smile, he probed deeper, guessing that a specific tragedy must have shattered the old man's mind in the first place. Startled by this piercing intuition, the innkeeper finally opened up about his older brother, a man far more talented than himself. Years ago, the brother was framed on absurd charges, prompting their renowned artisan father to beg the inspector of Luoyang for help, but the corrupt official demanded an astronomical bribe, forcing the desperate man to take a lethal loan from the Black-Bone sect. Despite paying that heavy blood money, all that returned to the family was a cold corpse wrapped in a straw mat, and their grief compounded into pure horror when they learned that the very inspector they bribed was the one who personally executed him. The innkeeper's face twisted in agony as he revealed the sickest part of the story. The whole tragedy stemmed from a petty bet between officials over the worth of their valuables, and when the one who submitted the father's masterpiece lost, he threw a tantrum and framed the eldest son just to punish the artisan. Back then, when the grieving father went to the government office to protest the injustice, the guards brutally kicked him to the dirt, and to ensure the master artisan could never create another piece to tarnish an official's pride, they completely crushed his hands. After that day, the mutilated man locked himself in his workshop, ignoring his younger son's pleas at the door until the day he died. Back in the illusion, So Yun held up the unfinished mask to ask the man if he truly still didn't understand the meaning behind this final piece, The innkeeper just dropped to his knees, begging our hero to enlighten him. The clumsy craftsmanship of the crude eyeless face was only natural, because the old artisan had been driven completely mad by grief and starvation, reduced to a drooling, disheveled shell of a man. But even without his arms, he refused to stop working, gripping the carving chisel with his bare toes. His desperate movements left his feet shredded and bloody, yet he pushed through the agonizing pain, tethered to the mortal realm by nothing but a suffocating hatred for the world that destroyed his family. The very second the mask was completed, he took his last breath, birthing a cursed object forged from pure rage, a rage born from the memory of a happy, smiling family that was shattered into a million pieces and cast into the dark abyss by the whims of corrupt men. Now, standing on the blood-soaked battlefield of the Hyunul Pavilion, So-Yun's dark red aura flared to life. He remembered standing over the innkeeper's freshly murdered corpse in the ruined shop, realizing that the family's vengeful spirits had guided him there to claim the mask. As C's attendant closed her eyes, peacefully accepting Jeomju's lethal blast to protect the twin Buns girl. Rewind to that ruined workshop. Our boy stood surrounded by the slaughtered family, his voice cutting through the heavy silence as he finally answered the innkeeper's question. Holding up the featureless face, he explained that the mad artisan didn't leave it eyeless because he lacked the skill, and as he slid the cold porcelain over his glowing purple eye, a dark laugh escaped him, revealing the tragic truth. He deliberately chose to leave it blind, because this corrupt, sickening world was simply too unbearable to look at with open eyes. While our hero fully embraces his cursed new mantle, elsewhere in Loyang, the wicked are still celebrating their supposed victories. In a quiet alleyway, the sharp sting of a needle bites into skin, inking a fresh skull onto the massive arm of an absolute unit rocking a glowing red eye. The tattoo artist sinisterly notes that another mark means another life taken, but the tattooed younger brother suddenly interrupts and tells the shopkeeper to make himself scarce, just before the ceiling violently shatters inward, as a squad of dark-clad assassins drops into the room to surround the seated giant. Instead of panicking, the tattooed younger brother just flashes a manic grin. He's been waiting for this. As a masked swordsman lunges forward with blinding speed, the giant simply winds up a counter, his fist and eye ignited by a brutal red aura, and he caves the assassin's face in, knocking his teeth out in a single devastating blow. When another attacker tries to blindside him from the rear, that massive tattooed arm drops like an anvil, and he strikes the floor hard enough to create a shockwave that launches the poor guy straight into the air. Following up with a vicious spinning kick, the tattooed younger brother unleashes a crescent wave of energy to finish the job. But the moment his boots hit the wooden floor, a final assassin leaps at his exposed back. The giant doesn't even flinch, effortlessly pivoting to bury a glowing red fist straight into the attacker's gut. As the dust finally settles over a room littered with broken bodies, he gloats over the massacre, mocking their pathetic attempt at stealth before turning back to the terrified tattoo artist to casually demand 4 more skulls for his collection. Just then, his older brother strolls in to casually praise the younger sibling's handiwork, which the giant shrugs off as a little light exercise before his brother brings up some strange news from the boys downstairs. The brute's glowing red eye narrows in curiosity as a bloody informant crawls into the room to report that the mask shop they recently confiscated, the very same one where they slaughtered the entire family, is somehow still open for business, now run by a pale-faced scholar. The older sibling scowls in disbelief at the bizarre update, while Lord Jeomjul roars in fury and demands to know what kind of suicidal fool would dare defy him. Wasting no time, the two imposing brothers march through a sunlit courtyard, and their heavy boots announce their arrival at the disputed property. They find the pale-faced scholar sitting calmly at a desk, but the pair just scoffs, convinced the young brat is merely some lowly disciple. The older sibling steps right up to the table to interrogate him directly, flashing an aggressive smirk as he demands to know where the original artisan went, but in response our guy silently slides that cursed white mask over his face. The thug instantly flinches, completely unnerved as a suffocating aura radiates from the cheap porcelain. Trying to shake off the sudden chill, the older brother looms over the desk and barks out his demand again, but our hero just slowly turns his head, casually rests a hand on a random wooden desk ornament with peak main character energy, and pulls the mask aside to reveal a terrifying purple-eyed glare, asking if they happen to know the true face of the Buddha. The tattooed siblings recoil from the demonic aura, completely baffled by the cryptic Buddhist trivia. So-Yun lets out a condescending sigh, realizing spiritual debate is entirely wasted on this kind of filth, and rises to his feet with a serene, imposing dominance, prompting the humiliated brothers to decide they're just going to beat the answers out of him instead. The tattooed younger brother stomps into the mask shop, fully expecting the pale-faced scholar to drop in one hit, but as he takes in the surroundings, confusion stops him dead in his tracks. The aisles are completely pristine, and the siblings immediately suspect some kind of evil art since their men had supposedly leveled the place hours ago. The older brother kicks open a side door to search for their target, only to be met with a swirling vortex of dark purple energy. Ghostly hands emerge from the shadows to surround the terrified thug before a massive shadow hand violently seizes him and cuts off his gasp. The older brother is suddenly hoisted into the air by his throat, struggling helplessly as the demonic grip crushes his windpipe. Before the unseen force hurls him brutally through a wooden door, the tattooed younger brother rushes forward in a blind panic, but a gasp of shock escapes him as he takes in the nightmare unfolding around him, right before a dark hand shoots out from the floor to grab his ankle. With a forceful yank, the entity pulls him straight down into the shadows. He screams in absolute terror, tumbling backward into the abyss, and desperately gouges his fingernails into the floorboards before the unseen force yanks him away. Beside him, the older brother is reduced to begging for his life as the encroaching blackness swallows him whole, and their blood-curdling shrieks echo endlessly within the swirling purple void. The demonic domain fully manifests around them, revealing terrifying shadowy visages with jagged glowing white smiles, a pitch-black space filled with floating masks and bouncing eerie giggles, as the domain itself sadistically mocks its prey while it feeds. In a quiet memory, he sat peacefully in a sunlit forest, carving a piece of wood with the quiet realization that merely imitating a shape was never enough. Wondering what the true face of the Buddha actually looked like, he worked in silence until the piece was finally finished, and placed down a perfectly smooth, featureless wooden statue. He left it at the innkeeper's burial mound, telling the tragic family to finally rest in peace. Back in the present, our boy stands amidst the freezing darkness of his demonic domain, inviting Lord Jiamjul and the Blackbone sect to mock him all they want, because with a dead-eyed glare, he promises that their hollow ridicule is the only resistance they will ever muster against the slaughter he's about to unleash. A few days ago at the Hyonul Pavilion, the rest of the martial world remained completely oblivious to the one-man war our boy was about to wage. Inside, C calmly analyzed the political chaos tearing the Loyang sword house apart, noting that with the Grand Patriarch out of the picture, the various successors were rapidly consolidating their power, and whispers were even circulating that the old man hadn't just secluded himself but was actually poisoned. Back in the present, Zheng casually dismisses her older sister's political gossip as utter nonsense, but the eye-patch woman just smirks, taunting that she clearly hasn't earned the eldest young master's trust yet if she's this out of the loop. The attendant maid doesn't take the bait, knowing full well this is just a cheap trick to provoke her into spilling the sword house's internal secrets. Setting her teacup down, she flatly points out that this little 10-year reunion was never about her master's trust, prompting C to drop the act and bluntly declare that the young master is entirely to blame for the faction's current decline. A visible vein pops on Zheng's forehead as she forces a smile to passive-aggressively defend his lack of official authority, but her sister mercilessly twists the knife, mocking the fact that So Yun still hasn't managed to secure the young patriarch title. The insult instantly sets Zheng off, and her absolute loyalty to our boy flares up as she glares daggers across the table. Unfazed, C admits she was completely dumbfounded when she heard the news of the sudden transfer to the Wangguk Pavilion, which tips Zheng off that her sister has been digging into her background just like the rest of the political vultures. Taking a calm drag from her pipe, the broker acknowledges that her sibling is way too smart to make a move without a calculated reason, but she genuinely cannot fathom why anyone with a brain would choose to serve the useless swordless one. That hits a nerve, and Zheng's demeanor turns instantly ice-cold, as she strictly forbids the pavilion master from ever uttering that insulting title again. Realizing she actually crossed a line, C respectfully backs down and apologizes, clarifying that as an information broker, she knows my guy isn't entirely incompetent. Though with the Grand Patriarch missing in action for 10 long years, his rivals have amassed an insurmountable head start. Zheng just smiles and cryptically promises that her sister will understand her master's true power when the time finally comes. But before she can elaborate, those golden eyes widen in sudden shock, and a deafening thud echoes through the pavilion, violently cutting the reunion short. Before either of them can react, the wall violently explodes inward in a shower of splintered wood and debris as a squad of heavily muscled thugs floods the room, roaring orders to capture the pavilion master alive. C is completely stunned to recognize the intruders as the Blackbone sect, her mind frantically trying to comprehend why an underworld syndicate would commit absolute suicide by launching a brazen daylight raid on a neutral, heavily protected guild. But these men clearly don't care about the rules, and a scarred brute immediately lunges at Zheng to clear the path to his target, leaving C frozen in sheer horror as she watches the lethal strike threaten to crush her little sister. A few hours ago, on the bustling streets of Loyang, where the scarred guard was having a full-blown panic attack after temporarily losing track of his master, until our boy shot him a cold glare that instantly terrified the massive warrior into a stuttering mess. Slumping down in the dirt, the escort expressed his deep concern that Zheng was currently wandering the city completely alone, but the young master just took a bite of his skewer and confidently laughed off the idea that his maid could ever be in danger, and while his subordinate remained completely baffled by this absolute lack of worry, So-Yun just smiled, knowing exactly what his golden-eyed attendant was truly capable of. Back at the pavilion, Junla snatches C's smoking pipe off the table, and without a second of hesitation, she swings the makeshift weapon with terrifying force. The heavy wood cracks a tattooed attacker right in the neck, and the massive thug instantly collapses face first onto the floor, completely incapacitated. The rest of the Blackbone sect elites freeze, shocked that a delicate maid just dropped one of their best men, but Junla just confidently readies her new staff, staring down a room full of bloodthirsty killers. One of the thugs arrogantly smirks, warning her that playing hero without martial arts training is a quick way to die, an assessment even C silently agrees with, terrified her sister is about to be slaughtered. Just a few moments ago, Junla stood defiantly between the attackers and her sister, and as C desperately called out to beg her to run, she just tightened her grip on her newly snatched weapon, and calmly asked how long she needed to hold the line, prompting a frantic C to explain that her emergency safety measures would take exactly 15 minutes to trigger. The Blackbone sect thugs finally lose their patience with the stubborn maid and roar in anger as the entire group launches a coordinated lethal charge. A massive fist flies directly at Junla's face at blinding speed, but as her golden eyes flare to life, the world around her slows to an absolute crawl. She perfectly reads the muscle twitches of her opponent, casually leaning back as the heavy punch sails harmlessly past. A tattooed thug immediately follows up by thrusting a spear at her vitals, but she effortlessly ducks underneath the strike and delivers a brutal counterblow to his chest that sends him flying backward. Now realizing she's a genuine threat, the remaining attackers swarm her from all sides to force her on the defensive. Junla seamlessly pivots into close-quarters combat and plants a devastating kick into the nearest thug's chest, then improvises on the fly by launching her own shoe like a missile to crack a second attacker right in the skull. C can only watch in wide-eyed astonishment as the supposedly helpless maid puts on a masterclass in violence. Despite having zero formal training, she single-handedly dismantles the sect's elite forces and sends bodies flying across the room. Humiliated and enraged, a tattooed thug finally draws his sword, leaping into the air for a vicious overhead strike as C screams a warning, but those golden eyes track the descending blade with perfect clarity, and before the steel can even connect, she intercepts his attack by smashing her smoking pipe directly into his face. The wood shatters his nose in an explosion of blood before she follows through with a precise jab to his chest, sending the swordsman crashing flat onto his back, completely out cold. Junla catches her breath over her fallen opponent and asks her sister if her 15 minutes are up yet. And when a bewildered C demands to know where she learned to dismantle elite thugs with a literal smoking pipe, she casually claims she just picked the moves up by watching people over their shoulders. Before the pavilion master can even process that absurd statement, the remaining attackers in the room suddenly drop to the floor and heavy, deliberate footsteps echo through the ruined doorway. Junla's golden eyes widen in shock as she instantly recognizes the voice calling out from the shadows, and Jiamju, the blonde superior of the Blackbone sect, steps into the light alongside the scarred man in green to sadistically mock her own defeated men. She flashes a condescending smile at the exhausted sisters, making it brutally clear that their brief moment of victory is already over. Back at Hyonul Pavilion, Jiamju struts through a room of kneeling guards and dismisses her entourage, prompting C to furiously demand an explanation for the hostile intrusion. The blonde superior just flashes a smug smile and acts like she's an offended guest who was denied a cup of tea, escalating the verbal standoff by insulting the pavilion master's intelligence. She casually drops a veiled threat about what she'd do if she were an actual enemy, which is the only warning C gets before the scarred superior lunges forward to swipe his hidden blades through the air. The pavilion master weaves back just in time to let the lethal claws zip past her face, taking a shallow cut to the cheek while remaining completely unfazed by the sudden ambush. The scarred superior chuckles, genuinely impressed by the pavilion master's ironclad composure. But Jiamju steps up to the table to cut right to the chase. Her boys have been taking a lot of hits lately. C coolly points out that such losses are just the cost of doing business when a sect expands too aggressively, but the blonde woman isn't buying it, flat out accusing her host of pulling the strings behind the recent ambushes. She smugly asks if C is wondering how they managed to crash this room at the exact moment her defenses were down, bragging that she's finally secured a reliable source of information so she no longer has to rely on a half-baked organization like the Hyonul Pavilion. When C dryly asks if this supposed top-tier source actually pointed the finger at her, Jiamju just smiles, reaching into her fur stole to drop a massive bombshell about who really runs Luoyang. Jiamju presents a heavy bronze token, and Junla's eyes go wide as she recognizes the absolute authority of the sword house. The purple-haired woman demands to know exactly who she is dealing with, her golden eyes narrowed in tense silence. her enemy just brushes off the question, bragging that with this kind of backing she doesn't have to worry about the consequences of tearing the place apart, until a casual voice suddenly interrupts to ask if he can take a look at that. The women whip around in shock as our boy steps through the doorway with a smug grin, completely thrilled by his own dramatic timing. A brief cutaway reveals the scarred guard complaining about having to scale the outer wall when there was a perfectly good front gate, only for So-Yun to flash a serene smile and admit he chose the hard way purely because it looked cool. Back in the room, he casually extends his hand, and Jeomju stares at him in disbelief as he demands she hand over the token. The scarred man in green barks at the intruders, demanding to know who the hell they are. Our boy just flashes a confident smile, pointing out that their uniforms should make it pretty obvious, and while the Blackbone thugs recognize the sword house colors, they immediately try to play it off, acting like a couple of lowly guards don't scare them in the slightest, which only makes the scarred guard cross his arms and grind his teeth in sheer annoyance. Rewind to a few days ago at the local inn, where our hero faced this exact same flavor of disrespect when a bystander tried to warn the thugs that he was actually a hidden expert. The bald thug and his crew just laughed it off, mocking the very idea that this pretty boy scholar could actually fight, so So-Yun just let out a gentle sigh and calmly ordered his escort to handle it, an order the scarred guard happily obliged, cracking his knuckles as his eyes flared with a terrifying red aura. Back in the present, the scarred guard's terrifying aura hasn't changed a bit as he takes a deliberate step forward, and a suffocating wave of pressure instantly crashes over Jeomju's thugs. He takes a second heavy stride, leaving the tattooed attackers trembling violently under the sheer crushing weight of his presence. Then he plants his boot for a third, and the blonde woman's eyes widen in sudden shock, as the massive swordsman just blurs right past her defenses in a blinding streak of red light, slamming his foot down on the floorboards with a thunderous impact. The scarred guard drops to one knee, casually presenting the snatched medallion to our boy, and the blonde woman's hand trembles as the terrifying realization hits her. This supposed servant is a transcendent expert. Completely unbothered by her shock, So-Yun holds the medal up to the light. He cheerfully confirms to Jung-Ah that the little trinket is the real deal, prompting C to step in and explain the historical weight of the bronze token. She notes that it used to be a sacred oath of infinite trust before So-Yun cynically tosses it right back to the attacker, mocking how it's become nothing more than a cheap handout for shady business partners. Jeomju easily catches it, flashing a smug grin as she reminds them that cheap or not, it still guarantees her absolute safety from the sword house's blades. Our hero calmly agrees, noting that ignoring the token would completely shatter the sword house's hard-earned credibility. The blonde woman's eyes light up with cruel amusement as she realizes she's looking at the infamous Swordless One, a title he confirms without a single flinch. She bursts into a mocking fit of laughter, sarcastically clutching her chest like she was actually frightened for a second, then sneers at him for finally crawling out of his reclusive little shell. The attacker wonders aloud if he got bored of ruining his family from the inside and decided to drag their name through the mud out in the real world instead. But a smoking pipe slams hard against the wooden table, cutting her off as C barks a sharp warning to watch her mouth. She fiercely defends our boy's legitimacy, but Jeomju just laughs off the naive loyalty. The attacker brags that she's already secured a golden rope to the second young master, a true successor who makes this figurehead look like a joke. Suddenly she pauses mid-gloat, her red eyes sliding over to size up Jung-Ah, and a wicked smile spreads across her face as she points out the exact troublesome wench she was warned about. The golden-eyed maid stiffens in tight silence, while Jeomju practically purrs at the fun coincidence of running into her new target on the very same day. She leans in to ask why the girl threw away a golden opportunity to become the second young master's concubine just to serve the Swordless One. Her sneer cuts deep, suggesting that even a life as a mere plaything would be better than trusting a deadbeat. But Jung-Ah snaps back with a fierce warning to watch her mouth. Her master is a noble person far beyond the attacker's understanding. Jeomju just laughs and sarcastically agrees, then immediately tears into his reputation by pointing out how he abandoned his responsibilities to become the laughingstock of his own family. The golden-eyed maid bites her lip, forced to listen in tense silence because to the rest of Luoyang, the Swordless One is exactly that, an unfilial coward who hides in the shadows while his sick father tries to hold the clan together. The blonde superior arrogantly tilts her head, taunting the maid to speak up if she has any actual defense to offer, and the sheer helplessness of the moment leaves Jung-Ah dizzy with frustration. She knows exactly what kind of terrifying entity she serves, but right now, she doesn't have a single shred of proof to shut the mockery down. But before the mockery can go any further, a reassuring hand drops onto her shoulder, and our boy steps up with a dangerously calm smile, formally claiming the girl as his personal attendant and promising the thugs that if they push any further, they're going to see him actually get angry. Jeomju just smirks, since the board has gotten a little too crowded to finish the game today. She meets C's icy glare with a malicious promise that the next time she comes knocking, not even this pathetic deadbeat will be able to save them. The pavilion master can only watch, jaw clenched tight, as the blonde superior gives a mocking wave and sweeps out of the room with her heavy-hitting entourage in tow, leaving a suffocating silence in her wake. The second the danger is gone, the adrenaline completely leaves Jung-ah's body, and her apology cuts short as she drops heavily to her knees. C lunges forward to catch the maid before she hits the floor, but her frantic calls go unanswered as the sheer terror and exhaustion of the standoff drag the golden-eyed maid into a feverish unconsciousness. As the suffocating silence settles in the wake of the recent confrontation, our boy and Gyu stand watch over the unconscious Jung-ah, but the scarred guard's blood is absolutely boiling. His fist trembles with barely contained rage, furious that those underworld mutts dared to disrespect the sword house. And just as he wishes he could have hacked them to pieces, his violent fantasies are cut short when the young master softly apologizes. He remembers it clearly. Earlier that day, So Yun had calmly assured him that his duty was complete, advising the guard to return to the main house before he got lumped in with the inevitable political fallout. Gyu protested, insisting his sole purpose was to protect the eldest young master, but our hero quickly shut that down, pointing out that the warrior hadn't actually pledged his sword to him, a harsh truth that forced the scarred man to swallow his pride and apologize. So Yun then handed over a formal written document, officially dismissing him from his temporary escort mission and ordering him to step down, leaving Gyu with no choice but to accept as he turned away, tightly crumpling the paper in his fist. Back in the present, Gyu grinds his teeth, completely overwhelmed by a bitter sense of powerlessness, realizing that despite his high martial realm, he's never felt as utterly useless as he does today. Meanwhile, C rushes into the room, her eye wide with panic as she begs to know if her sister is going to be alright. Our boy casually glances over his shoulder to remind her that Jung-ah is just sleeping, but the older sister is way too impatient for that, pacing anxiously as she waits for a proper medical assessment. Unable to sit still, she shifts the topic to ask if he brought the intel on the Black Bone sect. Though before he can even answer, she pivots right back to demand her sister's condition, only for him to bluntly state that the girl is suffering from a serious illness. The terrifying diagnosis makes C's heart drop straight into her stomach, but her panic is completely unfounded. She recalls how earlier that day, So Yun dryly explained that being overworked was a serious illness that could easily kill a young person. Realizing her sister was just exhausted, C questioned why he even asked for the Black Bone sect intel in the first place. So he flipped through the provided documents and deduced that she was plotting something incredibly dangerous. Instantly defensive, the pavilion master shot back, demanding to know why the eldest young master cared. Back in the present, our guy straight up orders her to drop the matter, but C isn't having it, clapping back that the bronze token was the real deal. He warns her that the Sword House's intelligence division wields terrifying power, which only enrages the pavilion master further as she grips her weapon and accuses him of just sitting back and watching it all happen, prompting him to suggest they take this confrontation outside into the moonlit courtyard so the patient can rest. Her mind flashes back to their earlier argument, where her frustration finally boiled over as she asked him to name the greatest martial house in the world. When he casually answered with the Sword House, she completely lost her temper, screaming at him in disgust that the supposedly righteous clan handed a bronze token to underworld scum and abandoned the commoners of Loyang to bleed and starve in the streets. Our hero calmly corrected her, explaining that the main house wasn't just turning a blind eye, but actively using the Black Bone sect, a revelation that pushed her right over the edge. Demanding to know what he had been doing all this time if he knew the truth, she threw her harsh accusations right back in his face, accusing him of using his confinement orders as a pathetic excuse to idle his days away. Back out in the courtyard, C snaps at him not to boss her around when she's the one putting her life on the line. But our boy stops her dead in her tracks by spinning a sudden tale about two sisters who shared an unbreakable bond. She whips her head around, completely caught off guard by the shift in tone as he just keeps walking, describing an older sister who overflowed with justice and fought desperately to save her home. The story plays out like a grim prophecy. The older sister's righteous crusade fails, leaving her and her comrades slaughtered in the dirt. The tragedy shatters the highly talented younger sister and drives her completely mad with grief, sending her on a bloody rampage to butcher the martial artists who caused it. But her enemies are simply too strong, and she is ultimately hunted down and executed as a branded public enemy. C just stares at him, utterly confused by the dark tale, while our hero looks up at the night sky to note that the doomed siblings couldn't even leave behind their noble intentions. The fabricated history written by the victors reduced them to nothing but reviled traitors. When she admits she doesn't understand the point, he bluntly lays out the moral. It's a reality where the good perish in vain and evil naturally emerges victorious. He recalls how moments ago, the conversation shifted into a philosophical realm as he asked if she intended to accomplish her righteous crusade even if it required countless sacrifices, pressing harder to see if she could stomach the deaths of innocent people. A grim reality C vehemently denied would ever happen, but So Yun, radiating an ominous energy, explained that changing the massive flow of history requires a proportional amount of blood, a burden good people simply cannot bear. Back in the present, our boy decides to twist the flow of that very river himself, equipping the cursed white mask to fully embrace his infamy, making C's eye widen in absolute shock as she recognizes the terrifying visage. And as a blazing purple aura erupts around him, So Yun confesses that he once dreamed of changing the world before he realized it was a wicked dream. He sought tranquility, hoping to live a peaceful life, but his birth status made it impossible. So he tried to discard his greed to be as free as the wind, but after failing to change his own fate, he declares that the destiny of the two sisters is not yet decided. C is completely paralyzed by the overwhelming pressure radiating from him, frozen in place as his glowing purple eyes lock onto her, stating he will watch to see if her path intersects with his. The entire courtyard is instantly swallowed by his demonic domain as a colossal shadowy silhouette with piercing eyes manifests behind him, and he declares that his route is the absolute demonic path of the underworld, a hell beyond humanity, built on mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The sheer pressure leaves C gasping for air, utterly terrified as she finally grasps the true monstrous nature of the eldest young master. With C left gasping for air in the wake of his overwhelming demonic domain, So Yun's crusade of absolute slaughter continues over in the Loyang slums, a rotting breeding ground for the Black Bone sect. Outside one of their grim little branches, a bald, tattooed sect member sits comfortably, daydreaming about his next promotion and the underlings he'll soon command, until his delusions are cut short by a chilling voice as Yin So Yun arrives cloaked in a dark purple aura. Taking one look at the slender scholar, the muscular thug arrogantly tells him they don't recruit scrawny runts, and when our hero coldly clarifies that he isn't here to join, the large man completely ignores him and decides to give the kid a special interview anyway. He raises a massive fist, promising to put in a good word if the intruder can survive just 2 hits, which only annoys my guy even more as his mask flares with crackling purple energy at the sheer stupidity. The tattooed thug throws a massive hook while demanding to know what he's really doing here, but the strike hits nothing but air as the masked figure effortlessly evades it, instantly reappearing perched right on the man's back with a trail of dark energy bleeding from his eye. He grabs the brute by the skull, his gaze flaring with a menacing purple light as he drops the polite act to declare he actually came to eat them all. And with a casual surge of telekinetic power, he launches his victim high into the air, leaving him to flail helplessly in a web of dark tendrils. Commanding the panicked thug to sing, our boy clenches his fist to violently crush him with an invisible force, before manifesting a giant shadowy hand to snatch a second enemy by the throat, mockingly comparing the guy's terrified screams to a vocal warm-up. The shadowy grip tightens with a sickening crunch as he shatters the man's bones as a twisted reward, and with a jagged grin spreading across his darkened face, our boy effortlessly hoists another attacker high into the moonlit sky to mercilessly impale him on a barrage of purple energy spikes. Standing untouched in his pitch-black domain, he casually mocks the slaughtered thugs, his eye flaring with a brilliant purple flame as he chuckles at the carnage, and as his face physically distorts into a terrifying skeletal maw, he wonders if his incomplete mask has finally become a perfect monster. But the morbid thought is suddenly cut short by the thud of approaching footsteps. 3 more Black Bone sect elites burst onto the scene, stopping dead in their tracks as they take in the bloodbath, and our boy slowly turns to face them, his jagged mask and dark aura radiating pure menace as he casually greets his next meal. Sweating bullets, the thugs demand to know who the hell this monster is, desperately trying to assert some authority by warning him that he's just picked a fight with their branch. But So Yun just flashes a blood-splattered smile and ominously invites them to join the banquet, suddenly dashing forward in a blur of purple energy. The scarred leader leaps into the air, swinging a heavy sword down with everything he has, only for my guy to effortlessly catch the heavy steel with his bare glowing hand. Before the man can even process the impossible block, our hero's hand clamps right over his terrified face, and with a sickening crunch, he brutally crushes the leader's skull into an explosion of blood. The headless corpse drops to the dirt, prompting the surviving sect members to charge forward together. But my guy doesn't even flinch as a shirtless thug leaps at his back. He simply raises a hand to draw in a swirling mass of dark aura and unleashes a devastating shockwave in all directions, with the overwhelming impact launching the horde through the air, slamming them violently into the dirt and the surrounding walls, leaving So Yun to revel in the chaos and sadistically declare this battlefield the greatest banquet hall. Massive spikes of dark energy erupt from the shadows to instantly impale the surrounding attackers, as our guy stands amidst a raging storm of purple lightning that effortlessly vaporizes the rest of the horde, and dozens of mangled bodies rain down from the sky like a gruesome confetti drop. Fully enveloped in his freezing demonic aura, he surveys the massive pile of fresh corpses with genuine disappointment, and looms over a single groaning survivor to complain that the warm-up was just starting to get fun. He isn't about to let a perfectly good snack go to waste, so he violently snatches the terrified thug by the collar and hoists him up by the throat, casually pondering which part of the begging man is going to be the most filling. His face distorts into a horrifying jagged skull of pure purple energy to finish the lethal threat. But before he can take a bite, a blinding blue energy slash rips through the air. Our boy pauses, his glowing eyes snapping toward the sudden interference, and he leans back sharply, letting the high-speed blade whistle right past his face. A muscular, spiky-haired swordsman steps into the fray, his weapon crackling with aura as he boldly challenges the white-robed monster, leaping high into the air to unleash a relentless sweeping barrage of blue strikes, which So-yun effortlessly swats away with his dark tendrils, his manic smile never wavering for a second. The swordsman lands heavily back on the ground, his boots cracking the stone beneath him as he raises his blade defensively to stare down the terrifying intruder. But instead of being annoyed by the interruption, So-yun just chuckles, his glowing eyes flaring with genuine excitement now that a real martial artist has finally shown up to play. In the pitch-black courtyard, our boy just stands there radiating pure, demonic energy, while the spiky-haired swordsman curses him out before kicking off the dirt to close the gap. The guy launches himself into the air with a glowing downward slash, spinning into a relentless barrage of blue energy arcs he calls the revolving wheel, only for So-yun to casually raise his bare hands and tank the strikes like they're absolutely nothing. A maniacal laugh rips through his jagged skull mask as his purple aura flares out of control, and he just catches the glowing blade with a single hand, asking the so-called expert if that's seriously all he's got. The swordsman gasps for air, screaming in defiance as the suffocating dark energy closes in. Our boy doesn't even blink, he just swipes his clawed hand forward and unleashes a barrage of jagged shadow tendrils that brutally impale his opponent, lifting him clean into the air. The man shrieks in excruciating agony as his life is violently snuffed out and his lifeless corpse crashes back to the dirt. Still enveloped in that terrifying purple aura, So-yun slowly turns his gaze toward the shadows, his glowing eye narrowing in sinister disappointment as he complains that the fun ended way too fast. Leaving the courtyard behind, our boy descends into the Black Bone sect's secret underground space, stepping calmly past the severed heads of the frontline guards as his footsteps echo through the dark stone-walled corridors. He catches a sudden shift in the air above and effortlessly sidesteps a shirtless ambusher dropping from the ceiling with a massive axe, answering the clumsy strike with a casual flick of his wrist that sends a massive wave of dark purple energy ripping through the corridor. The attacker is instantly felled, crashing heavily to the stone floor before dark liquid-like shadows begin to pool around the young master's boots as he continues his advance. The shadows explode outward to fully manifest his demonic domain, transforming the underground space into a nightmare landscape of chains and hanging silhouettes. The surviving thugs look around in sheer panic, completely disoriented by the sudden, freezing darkness, but their confusion turns to pure dread as our hero looms over a cowering attacker. His purple eyes piercing the gloom, he takes a single heavy step forward and ruthlessly crushes the terrified man's leg beneath his boot, deaf to the agonizing screams echoing off the stone walls. As the thug wails in pain, So-yun finally takes in the horrific reality of the room around him, realizing this isn't just a hideout but a literal human slaughterhouse filled with hanging bodies, piles of bones, and boiling cauldrons. And when the crippled sect member has the absolute audacity to call him a crazy monster, the sheer hypocrisy only fuels his disgust. Our guy grips the scumbag by the skull as the man actually tries to justify the slaughter as mere business, screaming that they're only doing what they have to do to make a living. But those excuses fall on deaf ears as the young master's aura flares with overwhelming dark energy, winding up a massive strike to violently slam the hypocrite face first into the stone floor, relentlessly pummeling the downed attacker until he stops moving. Standing over the broken thug, he marvels at the sheer irony of a world that brands him a monster for killing yet turns a blind eye to this depravity. And questioning who the real lunatics are in this twisted reality, he gently closes the eyes of a battered young victim, his resolve hardening into absolute ice as he turns his back on the carnage to disappear down the dark corridor. Meanwhile, far from the blood-soaked slums, the scene shifts to Jiamju's luxurious hideout, where the blonde superior relaxes in a steamy bath, her thoughts drifting straight to the so-called swordless one. She wonders how the eldest young master managed to keep his movements a complete secret from his own house, resting her chin on her hand as she notes that his unshakable confidence completely contradicted the pathetic rumors she'd heard. To be that calm in a room packed with armed killers, he has to be hiding a massive secret, but she waves off the troubling thought for now, calling out to her steward with a complaint that her bathwater has gone cold. The scarred chief steward swallows nervously at her tone, bowing respectfully at the edge of the pool to acknowledge the complaint before turning away to bark an order at the unseen servants to heat the lady's bath. Moments later, two massive tattooed guards drag a pair of kicking, screaming captives into the steamy room. Jeonju callously observes the terrified victims, casually noting that their freshness has dropped a bit, and the bald executioner quickly apologizes for the poor quality, gripping a crying captive by the hair right over the water to bleed them out. With a cold, indifferent wave, Jeonju gives the order to begin, and the executioner tightens his grip on the blade over the screaming captives, right before a massive, brutal splash of crimson erupts across the room. The fresh blood dissolves instantly into the hazy, steamy water of the pool, prompting a satisfied sigh from the superior as she scoops up the dark liquid and smears it onto her face to keep the wrinkles at bay. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, that same sickening vanity fuels her maniacal laughter as she revels in her newly unleashed monstrous form. A memory flashes through her mind of a few days ago, when a panicked messenger suddenly interrupted her evening, crashing into the room while she admired her reflection to report that one of their factories had been completely wiped out. Annoyed, she spun around to demand exactly who dared touch her operation, but her subordinates could only nervously stammer that the attacker had sparked a mass panic before slaughtering the entire crew. Furious at the vague excuses, she screamed for a proper description, so the sweating subordinate hesitantly relayed the scattered rumors of an evil spirit or a demon, along with the chilling detail that the monster wore a blank white mask. Back in the present, Jeonju glares through the freezing darkness at our boy, the horrifying realization finally hitting her. The mythical white-masked demon is standing right in front of her. Back at the Blackbone sect base, Jeonju and her scarred steward are trying to make sense of the sudden string of massacres. Since their men died too quickly to leave a clear report, she deduces the attacker must be a highly skilled expert, which makes the steward shudder as he remembers a similar disaster last year when a wandering master wiped out an entire branch. In the martial world, those who properly learn to wield chi are rare enough, but the transcendent beings who break past the wall to become true experts are an absolute minority. She complains that for such a supposedly rare breed, they run into these freaks way too often in their line of work, so she orders her men to just keep their heads down and lay low. She assumes whoever is throwing a tantrum will eventually get bored and move on, scoffing at the idealistic fools playing chivalrous hero, and tells her crew to simply adapt and survive. But her spiky-haired subordinate looks deeply troubled, muttering something under his breath about a demon. Jeonju catches the whisper and demands to know what's on his mind, which prompts the scarred steward to step in and bring up a crew of hired hands who recently vanished from one of their gambling dens. At first, they just chalked it up to flaky freelancers cutting and running like they always do. Except the spiky-haired subordinate suddenly clams up, looking incredibly nervous. The blonde superior barks at him to spit it out, so he admits he's a regular at that joint and caught wind of a deeply disturbing rumor. The survivors didn't just flee, they claimed they were hunted by a terrifying purple-eyed ghost wreathed in swirling dark energy. The spiky-haired subordinate confesses he normally wouldn't buy into such ghost stories, but with so many witnesses it's hard to ignore. Jeonju furiously shuts him down, screaming at the man for entertaining such superstitious trash and demanding they focus on actual productive business instead of fairy tales. But mid-rant, a sudden thought gives her pause. She can't help but wonder if there really is another bizarre entity out there, one as terrifyingly unnatural as her own shadowy master. Before she can dwell on the idea, a panicked messenger bursts into the room, gasping for air as he screams that yet another of their branches has been completely wiped out. She grits her teeth and demands to know if it was the white mask guy again, which the trembling lackey quickly confirms. Jeonju just sighs and rubs her temples, having fully expected to lose a few more dens before the attacker cooled off. Given the sheer speed of the destruction, she concludes this white mask guy is definitely an expert, so she coldly decides to stick to the plan and just ignore him, treating her slaughtered men as easily replaceable fodder. The scarred steward agrees, since hiring their own underworld experts to fight back would cost a fortune anyway. Exhausted by the constant headaches, she waves them all off and demands a massage, and the steward bows deeply to take his leave. But before she can even catch her breath, another frantic shout echoes from the hall and she whips around, a look of utter dread washing over her face as she realizes the nightmare is far from over. By morning, the sun rises over the bustling streets of Luoyang, but the city is already buzzing with whispered rumors about the Blackbone sect's dens being destroyed overnight. As the gossip spreads, the numbers quickly inflate, with townspeople soon claiming 10 or even 15 bases were completely wiped out. The most chilling detail, though, is that not a single corpse or drop of blood was left behind, leaving the terrified locals to wonder what kind of monster cloaked in dark energy could pull off a massacre of this scale. Meanwhile, at the imposing Luoyang sword house, the mood is far less gossipy and far more lethal. The family head glares down from his seat, furious that his underworld affiliate has zero intelligence on the attacker, and he scoffs at Jeonju's weak excuses as his patience wears dangerously thin. He demands to know how the great Luoyang sword house could be left completely blind. The sheer force of his killing intent makes her flinch, and she bows deeply to offer a desperate, trembling apology. She remembers it clearly. a previous summons where the family head accused her of forgetting her place, his eye flaring red as he demanded to know if she thought she'd earned her rank through nepotism. The crushing pressure of his gaze left her drenched in sweat, and she could only stammer out a pathetic denial while cowering under his authority. Back in the present, the Sword House leader leans back in his chair, disgusted by her incompetence. He coldly snaps that she has already wasted 15 minutes of his time, and with a furious glare he barks at her to get out of his sight. Jiamju swallows her pride and bows deeply, accepting the dismissal without a word. The memory of that earlier visit still haunts her, as she had paced through this very hall to face him, when the old man looked up from his documents to deliver a dead serious ultimatum, swearing that one more failure would see her Sword House bronze token stripped away and handed to someone else, a threat that left her frozen in terror and proved her entire power base hung by a thread. Meanwhile, across the city, the morning peace is shattered by frantic shouting outside the Sword House astronomer's residence, where the head stargazer is fast asleep at his cluttered desk, snoring loudly enough to rattle the inkwells. His colleague sighs in total exasperation, realizing gentle nudges aren't going to cut it, so he just grabs the guy by the shoulders and shakes him like a rag doll, screaming that it's a full-blown emergency. The terrified night shift worker frantically explains that he saw something horrifying in the sky last night, a terrible omen and a sure sign of impending disaster. But the older man just groggily takes a sip of his morning drink and brushes the panic off, since bad signs are a dime a dozen around here. He freezes mid-sip, however, when the younger man clarifies that this wasn't just your average bad luck. Sweating with terror, the night shift worker reveals he observed the heavenly killing star, the ultimate harbinger of blood and death. Back at the Sword House, the spiky-haired colleague is in absolute disbelief over the terrifying rumors, wondering if the legendary heavenly killing star, the ultimate harbinger of blood and death, could really have returned. He sits back, realizing that if this ghost story holds any weight, they are dealing with a catastrophic threat, which prompts his top-knot colleague to rub his temples and suggest they kick this nightmare up the corporate ladder. But the spiky-haired man just scoffs, knowing the higher-ups would laugh them out of the room for reporting a fairy tale. So the top-knot guy pivots and suggests they at least warn their chief supervisor instead. His partner shoots that down too, noting that their boss is basically a political paperweight. And right on cue, the scene cuts to the man himself standing outside in his pristine white robes, completely oblivious to the apocalyptic threat looming over the city. Meanwhile, in a quiet village on the outskirts of Luoyang, a crowd of desperate locals gathers around a ragged, blindfolded elder to eagerly ask old man Umuk if he's having another one of his famous visions. The elder just sits in absolute silence, reaching his mind out into the ether, until he slowly raises a hand as he senses an unnatural, freezing darkness swallowing the sky, and a jolt of pure shock hits him as he recognizes the terrifying energy. He leaps to his feet, his voice trembling with awe, throwing his arms wide to declare that the master of dark heaven has finally appeared. He screams to the heavens to proclaim that the ancient demon who devours darkness has awakened, and the crowd listens in stunned silence as the fanatic preaches about a white-masked punisher, promising salvation to the starving and the destitute and whipping the villagers into a frenzy. Dancing maniacally under the pitch-black sky, he celebrates the arrival of the venerable one of dark heaven, and while some onlookers whisper in disbelief, convinced the elder has finally lost his mind, but Umuk just laughs, ecstatic that the true master has descended to strike down the wicked. And he's right, because the legend of the Venerable One, a white-masked ghost who brings heavenly punishment, is already spreading like wildfire. Across the underworld, absolute chaos has already broken out, and at the Hyonul Pavilion, C reviews the impossible intelligence reports, which reveal that the Blackbone sect is being systematically annihilated by a demon wearing a white mask. She turns to her blunt guard, Gyu, to ask for her thoughts on the matter, but the swordswoman just tilts her head and asks for clarification. C's mind flashes back to a few days ago, when she had specifically ordered her guard to keep a close eye on the eldest young master. She had sharply scolded the swordswoman for disrespectfully calling him by his derogatory nickname, though Gyu simply noted that the young master felt entirely different from the pathetic rumors, prompting an exasperated sigh from her boss, and a strict reminder to keep their affiliation a secret. Back in the present, Gyu casually mentions that our hero actually seems incredibly magnanimous, then drops the absolute bombshell that she tested him by blasting him with pure killing intent, and he didn't even flinch. C processes this casual confession for a split second before exploding in absolute fury, screaming at her subordinate for recklessly attacking a high-profile VIP. Another memory hits her. A few weeks ago, she had tracked her sister down to a rustic kitchen, cornering the purple-haired woman there to ask about her mysterious new master. C tried to play it cool, claiming she just wanted to know who her sibling was serving, but Jung-ah politely shut the entire conversation down and refused to leak a single detail. At Wangguk Pavilion, C playfully teases Jung-ah about how fiercely she defends our boy, and the purple-haired woman just smiles warmly and thanks her sister for checking in, before dropping the act to seriously advise her to just go meet him in person. Taking the advice, C and her swordswoman Gyu soon find themselves sitting across from Yi and So-yun, who calmly pours tea and politely asks them to suppress their killing intent so it doesn't ruin the flavor, prompting the guard to bluntly announce she's dropping the aggro since that little murder test is over anyway, leaving her boss absolutely flabbergasted by the sudden vibe shift, while our hero flashes a gentle smile and pushes the freshly brewed cups forward. C sweats nervously as she accepts the drink, pointing out that her guard didn't need to be served, but Gyu swiftly snatches the cup and thanks him anyway, taking a sip and immediately complimenting the aroma, leaving C internally fuming at the sudden polite facade. Our guy just chuckles modestly, but the swordswoman doubles down, insisting she isn't the type to hand out empty praise, so he casually offers her a spot on his payroll if she ever wants to jump ship, to which C jokes that with her own terrible temper her guard might actually take him up on that offer. He laughs heartily at the jab, while Gyu silently watches the exchange, amazed at how unusually comfortable her lady acts around this supposedly powerless deadbeat, until the host finally sets his cup down and shifts gears to ask what brings the busy information broker out to his humble pavilion. Dropping the pleasantries, C stares him dead in the eye and asks the million-dollar question, is he the venerable one of Dark Heaven? Keeping that perfectly polite smile plastered on his face, our boy plays completely dumb and asks what that even is, but the pavilion master refuses to back down, pressing him with the survivor reports from the recently annihilated Black Bone sect branches and describing a mysterious rescuer who carved through the thugs wearing a white mask and the crisp cotton robes of a scholar. Taking another casual sip of his tea, So-yun remarks that this vigilante sounds like a stand-up guy, which only makes C narrow her one good eye and point out that he owns that exact same outfit, though the young master's smile just sharpens into something a little more mocking as he asks if she intends to search his belongings. Fed up with his endless tea-time deflections, C finally snaps, flashing back to their last encounter and demanding the actual truth behind what he told her back then. And for a long moment So-yun just sits in absolute silence, letting that gentle, harmless facade melt away into something far more dangerous, before staring right through her to ask if she is truly prepared for the answer. A few hours ago, C stared our boy down and declared she was fully prepared for whatever came, though she admitted she had spent days agonizing over his cryptic warning. The terrifying reality that changing the flow of history required a massive river of blood. Her fist trembled as she forced herself to accept that innocent lives might be the necessary cost, before she finally asked if he was planning a full-scale dynastic revolution. So-yun just chuckled at the grand phrasing. He quoted Mencius, stating that a ruler who abandoned righteousness was no longer a king, but a common ruffian, and killing a ruffian wasn't assassinating a monarch, it was just taking out the trash. The young master mused over his teacup, letting the heavy philosophy hang in the air, until C narrowed her eye to ask if that bloody path was truly what he intended to walk. A path that looked less like a righteous rebellion and more like the demonic corpse-filled hellscapes of the underworld. C pointed out that a full-scale revolution was practically impossible in this era, and our boy actually agreed, as the unnatural stability of their corrupt world made it a pipe dream. Since a conventional uprising was completely absurd, the pavilion master asked what his actual plan was, prompting him to lean in with a deadly serious expression and ask why the blood spilled to change history always had to belong to the innocent. Flashing a manic smile with his eyes glowing a sinister purple, our boy pitched an absolutely unhinged alternative: just slaughter the bad guys instead. And while the sheer scale of the idea caught C completely off guard, but my guy calmly suggested replacing the inevitable mountain of innocent corpses with a mountain of villains, she tried to write the concept off as some morbid joke, so So-yun stood up from the table and casually brushed it off as a purely hypothetical thought, though he left her with the chilling suggestion to give it some serious consideration. Left alone at the table, C wrote the concept off as childish, arguing that the standards of law and morality were way too subjective to ever cleanly separate good from evil, and even if someone could draw that line, no single person possessed the sheer power to slaughter enough targets to actually rewrite history, a reality that made unilaterally judging and executing sinners the act of a madman. But her firm condemnation was suddenly derailed by a terrifying realization. Cutting back to the present, the myth of the white-masked reaper manifests in the void, as that exact agent of divine punishment now stands right in the middle of the battlefield and unleashes a freezing dark domain. He radiates an overwhelming aura of death, flashing a sinister smile beneath the shadows as he mockingly embraces his new title as the Venerable One of the Dark Heavens. Watching from her command post, C remembers calling his grand plan a childish thought, yet staring into the abyss, she can't help but wonder if this absolute madman can actually pull it off. The sheer weight of his chosen path finally crushes down on her. The realization that he's taking on the sins of the world so the innocent don't have to bleed, a brutal road that only a true demon could ever walk. Flashing back to the end of their meeting, C formally took her leave, as the shadowy figure in white calmly acknowledged her hard work. She laid out the current tactical board, explaining that only the Blackbone sect's main headquarters remained standing, and announced her plan to lead an elite strike force to lock the place down. Our boy warned her of the political fallout since GMJU held the Sword House bronze token, but C made it clear she wouldn't be storming the interior, leaving the actual slaughter entirely to him. She asserted that her forces would hold an impenetrable perimeter, swearing that not a single rat would slip away from the massacre inside, and if the Sword House had a problem with that, she was ready to clash with whoever handed out that bronze token. Our boy just smirked at the sheer audacity of it all, letting C and Gyu bow out to finalize their preparations while he remained standing alone behind the curtain. Back in the present, the reality of that blockade is far bloodier. A heavy blade slices through the air, and a scarred Blackbone enforcer ruthlessly strikes down his own fleeing men. Screaming at the cowards for daring to turn their backs on the fight, he raises his crimson sword to rally the survivors in GMJU's name, roaring at the horde to brace for a fanatical, glorious death. Hours earlier at GMJU's hideout, the blonde superior sat at her desk and received a devastating report. A subordinate confirmed her worst fears, revealing that her adoptive father was playing it safe and refusing to deploy his precious experts to save her. She gritted her teeth against the bitter reality. The monstrous man viewed his adopted daughters as nothing more than disposable pawns, and the tension only spiked when her scarred steward nervously stepped up to deliver his final message. The scarred steward hesitated to drop the final hammer, but when he finally spoke, GMJU's face twisted into unhinged fury. She unleashed a deafening scream and shattered her wooden desk into splinters, gasping for air as the bitter reality of her abandonment fully set in, and she demanded to know how many slaves were left in the headquarters, only for her subordinate to nervously admit they barely had any on hand. As the looming shadow of her monstrous master filled her thoughts, she remembered his order to gather every useless non-combatant for a blood sacrifice, and with a sadistic smile, GMJU resolved to perform his bizarre secret ritual to seal her terrifying fate. As the sun begins to set over the Blackbone sect's main headquarters, the courtyard sits dead quiet under the eerie glow of red lanterns, until dozens of boots silently touch down on the tiled floors. The masked guards of the Hyonul Pavilion sweep the perimeter, confirming there's no sign of the enemy just yet, and ready their blades and metal claws for the impending strike. Guided by the cover of a cawing crow, the assassins move out as a perfectly synchronized unit. One of the agents takes a vantage point on the rooftop to survey the grounds, and with a simple nod, he signals the ground team to advance. Meanwhile, inside a dimly lit staging room, a subordinate kneels before the Hyonul commander to confirm that Squad 15 is officially in position. The commander gives the silent order to proceed, and the masked agents leap straight into the night sky to execute their lethal mission. Earlier that evening, C's forces had mobilized across the city rooftops with incredible speed, touching down silently at their designated checkpoints. An agent reported directly to her, confirming that all civilians in the blast radius had been safely evacuated, and that every single collaborator was on standby, ready for her command. Back in the present, C issues her final directive, ordering everyone to hold their current positions and stay alert. She reminds them to engage strictly according to the rules of engagement once the chaos starts. While outside, the sun dips lower over the traditional buildings. The pavilion master stands resolute, her eye patch gleaming in the fading light. A voice suddenly breaks the silence to ask if she's feeling anxious, coming from her masked attendant, who stands faithfully by her side. C admits that rather than anxious, her feelings are just a bit complicated, pressing the girl who tries to play dumb since she knows her subordinate overheard her entire conversation with So Yun about his bloody crusade. Earlier that evening, C asked the girl what she truly thought of the eldest young master, and the attendant admitted she considered him a good person, albeit a terrifying one, even knowing his true identity as the Venerable One of Dark Heaven. C agreed, confessing that she didn't have a logical reason to trust him, it was purely a gut feeling, and without hesitation, her loyal subordinate pledged to follow wherever her lady's heart led. Recalling the reassuring hand on her shoulder from her own past, C stepped forward and left her old masked identity behind to fully embrace her role as the pavilion master. She thought back to our boy's insane vow to continuously slaughter the wicked until the world changed, realizing how completely crazy it sounded. But back in the present, remembering him radiating that overwhelming dark purple energy, she can't help but believe he might actually pull it off. Meanwhile, over at the Blackbone sect headquarters, the tension finally snaps. A skull-faced commander grips his axe, furious at the sudden intrusion as he curses the Hyonul guards for having the audacity to step on their turf. 3 of the masked swordsmen stand their ground with weapons drawn, bracing themselves as a massive horde of tattooed thugs floods the courtyard. With a bloodthirsty roar, the Blackbone attackers rush in to swarm them, and the lead thug brings his sword crashing down. But before his blade can even connect, a massive spray of blood erupts across the thug's chest. Another bald attacker is suddenly slashed wide open, leaving the braced defenders completely stunned. A dark boot touches down silently on the blood-soaked stones, as Hyonul assassins materialize from the shadows to brutally strike down the front line before they can even react. The masked agents blur rapidly through the enemy ranks with lethal precision, impaling one brute straight through the chest from behind, and in mere seconds the supposedly overwhelming Blackbone horde is effortlessly decimated. The surviving thugs can only watch in horror as their front line is ripped apart by unseen strikes, so the panicked, skull-faced commander screams for his men to fall back and clear the way. But just as the Hyonul guards think they have the upper hand, a heavy rumbling shakes the courtyard. One defender's eyes widen in sheer shock as a fresh horde of heavily tattooed elites comes charging out of the dust, and this time they're armed with long spears. A literal forest of deadly iron blots out the red sky to completely neutralize the assassins' close-quarters advantage, leaving the masked defenders to realize they are suddenly, hopelessly outranged. Back at the command post, a masked messenger urgently calls out to C, reporting that the enemy's numbers are swelling and they've even pulled the guards meant to defend their main building. Without hesitation, the Pavilion Master orders all reserve forces deployed and grants her field commanders full autonomy to handle the escalating threat, noting that the enemy is throwing absolutely everything they have at the front line, which leaves their own headquarters completely vulnerable. Her attendant worries that emptying their reserves will leave them desperately short on manpower against hidden martial artists. But C confidently predicts that opportunistic fighters will attack the exposed base for them, until her subordinate points out a massive flaw. Jeonju possesses the Sword House bronze token. C freezes, a cold sweat breaking out as she realizes no sane martial artist would dare attack an affiliate of the Loyang Sword House, and desperate to save face after making such a massive tactical error, she stammers out a weak defense. She argues that they still have the venerable one of the Dark Heavens on their side, hoping that if our boy is as amazing as the rumors claim, he'll arrive just in time to save them. But before she can even finish the thought, a massive fiery explosion obliterates the building, and the shockwave violently throws her backward through the air. Her eye widens in shock as burning debris rains down around her. But before she can slam into the dirt, her masked attendant leaps into action and catches her midair. The subordinate frantically checks on her dazed master as thick smoke billows across the courtyard, leaving them completely disoriented by the sudden devastation. The ruins of the command post collapse in a roaring inferno, accompanied by maniacal laughter echoing through the haze as a dark, fiery shadow looms right in front of them, radiating a crushing aura. C looks up in horror, instantly recognizing the figure stepping out of the flames. It's Jeonju, but the blonde superior is barely recognizable as human anymore. Monstrously warped by her dark blood ritual, her face is heavily scarred and her eyes glow a demonic red as she flashes a sadistic smile. C and her masked guard recoil in horror at the grotesque monster standing before them, as Jeonju flashes a crazed smile and locks her glowing red eyes dead onto the Pavilion Master. The blonde woman launches herself forward like a rabid beast screaming for blood, and C's eye widens in sheer panic as the strike closes in, but Gyu throws himself directly into the attacker's path. He desperately barks at his lady to run while he holds the line, so she turns and sprints away with a final plea for him to survive, silently praying for our boy to finally show up and drop his dark heaven on this nightmare. A massive gust of wind rips through the burning courtyard, and Jeonju seethes with pure rage as her monstrous transformation fully sets in. She immediately sprints after the fleeing Pavilion Master, furious that her prey is trying to slip away, but the scarred guard plants himself right in her path to cut her off. The blonde monster grinds her jagged teeth, warning him to step aside if he doesn't want to die right here and now. Unfazed, the loyal warrior just raises his blade, declaring that he still has his pride and absolutely refuses to go down without a fight. The power scaling in this universe goes like this. As martial artists grow, they eventually hit a ceiling where their progress completely stalls out, a barrier known as the wall. However, those rare few who manage to shatter that limit attain a level of strength so overwhelming it's like they become a completely different person, earning them the terrifying title of an expert. Gyu braces himself against a suffocating wave of fiery red energy, as blood trickles down his face with the grim reality setting in. Jeonju has crossed that very threshold, and she proves it by slamming the ground to send a massive energy spike erupting upward. The guard leaps backward into the air, but she relentlessly pursues him with a wide-area barrage of crimson slashes, while nearby C's masked attendant is left absolutely shook as the monster's arm, a grotesque glowing red mass of muscle and veins, rapidly regenerates and then swings down with devastating force to detonate the entire courtyard. Emerging from the dust, Jiamju cackles like a maniac, mocking the masked guard for thinking he ever stood a chance against a true expert. She immediately follows up with a blinding barrage of crimson energy claws, and he desperately raises his blade just to survive the onslaught, until the monster blurs right into his face, freezing his blood with a final sadistic whisper, before a colossal red hand manifests in the air above them, and slams down to obliterate the battlefield in a deafening fiery explosion. Gyu takes the absolute brunt of the shockwave, and the brutal force nearly tears him apart, dropping him into the cratered dirt to cough up blood as his sword clatters uselessly out of reach. Through the swirling dust, a monstrous pale foot steps forward as Jiamju looms over his broken form, flashing a sadistic razor-toothed smile to mock him for actually surviving that hit. The scarred guard heaves for breath beneath his mask, planting his bleeding hand in the dirt with the grim realization that his internal energy is completely tapped out. Processing the sheer insanity of the massive red energy hands he's been desperately dodging, the terrifying realization hits Gyu. This absolute monster is spamming all this AoE destruction completely barehanded. He stares up at her cracked, glowing skin, completely horrified by whatever twisted ritual morphed her into this towering beast. But my guy still clenches his empty fists and forces his battered body back to his feet. Jiamju barely even registers him, her face twisting in rage as she snaps at the stubborn warrior for ignoring her sadistic compliments, and she flares her aura, projecting a suffocating wave of pure red killing intent across the courtyard. The sheer pressure of it leaves C's masked attendant paralyzed with terror, as the blonde monster casually summons a massive storm of crimson lightning, daring them to try and survive this next strike, and drops a devastating energy blast straight down toward the helpless subordinate. But before the blast can obliterate her, a massive spiked gauntlet swings into frame to shatter the crimson beam into harmless sparks, leaving the masked attendant completely stunned, staring up at the young girl with twin buns standing protectively in front of her. The newcomer just flashes a confident smile and cheerfully announces their arrival, right as a second blur of motion tears past them, a glowing sword strike that slams straight into Jiamju and knocks her flying backward, while Gyu watches in absolute shock, before a muscular swordsman touches down firmly to complete the duo's dramatic entrance. The girl just raises her spiked gauntlet and proudly claims the title of their official backup, but the swordsman immediately steps in front of her, swinging his massive broadsword to deflect a retaliatory wave of red energy as he openly acknowledges the terrifying pressure radiating from the blast. The duo falls into a back-to-back stance to prepare for the worst, forcing a battered Gyu to desperately ask if there's anyone else on the way, only for the team to tearfully admit that they are the absolute last resort. With no other options, Gyu grips his weapon tight and steps up to join the newcomers in a desperate final formation. The three warriors stare down the monstrously transformed Jiamju, their combined auras completely swallowed by the sheer scale of her swirling red power, as the blonde woman flashes a sadistic, jagged smile and dares the little insects to attack her all at once. But before the defenders can even make a move, the sky over the pavilion chokes with black smoke. Below, the Black Bone Sect attackers draw their blades and advance like a tide of shadows. C grits her teeth, completely helpless as her carefully laid plans burn to the ground, and a desperate cry for Gyu rings out over the roaring flames. She frantically demands to know if any backup is left, only for a subordinate to deliver the grim truth. Frustrated, she tries to order Squad 3 to hold the line, but a bloodied fighter stumbles into view, shouting that the casualties are too high and they have to retreat. Desperate reports flood in from all sides as another unit begs for reinforcements, and as the front line completely shatters, C is left in absolute shock at how fast her forces are crumbling. Across the rooftops, the sounds of clashing steel and dying screams echo into the night, as the Black Bone Sect thugs tear through the courtyard like rabid beasts, completely ignoring their own wounds. One muscular thug brings his heavy blade down on a guard, sending sparks flying from the sheer force, and the defender groans as his weapon buckles under the weight. His eyes widen in absolute terror as he realizes he is fighting a literal monster. The attacker doesn't even flinch, pressing the assault, despite having a sword shoved entirely through his stomach. Nearby, another tattooed killer leaps from the high ground, and he drops like a stone to land a devastating punch right into a guard's chest. The defender can only watch in paralyzed shock as a lethal blade is raised, before the attacker impales him straight through the heart with a sickening crunch. Even when a pavilion agent manages to land a fatal stab or when another slashes a thug deep across the chest, the frenzied horde just keeps coming. The sheer numbers and ferocity of the tattooed attackers simply shatter the defensive line, and the masked guards can only watch in horror as desperate cries for help are drowned out by the clash of steel. The courtyard rapidly devolves into a meat grinder of severed limbs and flying blood. It's a one-sided massacre that leaves the survivors completely paralyzed with fear, reducing the once proud pavilion to a literal living hell where maimed bodies are left to bleed out in the dirt. Elsewhere, C's masked attendant is pushed to her absolute limit, desperately standing her ground to shield the Twin Buns girl from a sweeping wave of dark red energy. Jiamju smiles sadistically from the center of the swirling aura to mock their pathetic struggle. and the attendant can only glare back as she feels the terrified girl trembling behind her. A massive core of dark red energy crackles as it charges up for a lethal strike, and the crushing pressure forces the young girl to cough up blood. Reveling in the despair of her helpless prey, the blonde woman laughs maniacally, promising to send their master to the afterlife right behind them so they won't be lonely. Watching from afar, C stands battered and tense, clenching her jaw as the bitter taste of helplessness floods her mouth. She refuses to let her masked attendant's desperate pleas to run be in vain or waste the time Gu bought by sacrificing himself. Instead, she white-knuckles the hilt of a fallen sword, fully locking in for the final boss phase. A small, resolute smile breaks through the dirt and bruises on her face because even though she knows there's no chance of winning, she refuses to back down. Jiamju just throws her head back and cackles, gathering a massive sphere of swirling red energy in her mutated hand, and with a casual flick of her wrist, she fires the devastating blast with a twisted order to go wait for their master in hell. The attendant's eyes widen in absolute horror as the lethal glow swallows them whole, while out in the courtyard the sudden flash catches C off guard. She whips her head toward the source of the light just as a massive explosion of red fire erupts from the upper levels of the pavilion. But before the dust can even settle, a heavy rumble echoes across the grounds, and the entire world suddenly inverts. The surviving Blackbone attackers freeze in their tracks, completely disoriented by the pitch-black sky. The temperature absolutely plummets, and a freezing, unnatural cold sinks straight into C's bones as the night descends. A reality-warping darkness that catches a defender right in the middle of a strike, halting the chaotic melee in an instant, as every single combatant on the battlefield drops their weapons in overwhelming, suffocating dread. A single foot steps onto the courtyard and a squirming dark purple aura instantly infects the earth. The entire Hyonul pavilion is swallowed by churning demonic clouds as the advent of night completely erases the light, and high above, a massive glowing mask manifests in the pitch-black sky to mock the world below. Then a chilling voice echoes from the void to ask C if she was waiting for him. She flinches, her breath catching in her throat as the eerie presence looms right behind her. Across the battlefield, Jiamju breaks out in a cold sweat, and her sadistic confidence shatters into stunned disbelief. Bathed in the intense swirling purple energy, our guy finally reveals himself in all his terrifying glory. The venerable one of the dark heavens has arrived. As the unnatural darkness descends, our boy closes his eyes to dwell on a profound question. And as they slowly open, his focus sharpens on the exact moment he first learned the truth about his power. Deep in a shadowed tomb, the immortal old man asked him what he thought demonic chi truly was. Most martial artists believed it was just a path to overwhelming destructive strength, a wicked aura that violently stripped away a person's humanity until nothing but a monster remained. But the orthodox sects actually knew absolutely nothing about the phenomenon, and the skeletal elder had chuckled at their sheer ignorance, explaining that this sinister force didn't follow the rules of standard martial arts at all. We get a straight-up nightmare vision of screaming skinless humanoids, a bloody bald dude, and a giant monstrous red eye, proving that this squirming purple energy isn't some basic martial arts aura born from this world, but rather an incomprehensible alien power that leaked in from the outer universe. A chaotic mass that exists only to erode, tear apart, and completely distort reality itself. And now our boy is dragging that reality-warping nightmare straight onto the battlefield, his focus sharpening as he taps into the absolute depths of his dark pact. The sky above him violently churns with black and purple lightning, and his eyes shift, the sclera turning pitch black as those signature glowing irises flare to life. Down below, the Blackbone sect attackers freeze in their tracks as the ground literally rumbles beneath their feet, the sheer, suffocating weight of the atmosphere crushing the breath right out of their lungs. Shrouded in swirling dark energy behind his terrifying bone mask, So-Yun officially raises the curtain on this slaughter, letting out a booming demonic laugh that chills the entire courtyard to the bone. Even Jiamju, who just reached the transcendent expert level, physically flinches and aborts her lethal strike, as the unnatural darkness swallows the courtyard and makes even the raging fires look pitch black. Her mutated eye twitches as she tries to comprehend the suffocating pressure, and for the first time since her horrific transformation, a paralyzing terror claws at her mind. She grits her jagged teeth to desperately shake off the primal fear gripping her, and furious at her own hesitation, she glares down from the balcony at her paralyzed subordinates, roaring that she'll personally execute anyone who dares to run away. But her threats fall on completely deaf ears, her men just trembling uncontrollably as they stare into the void. Looking up at the swirling purple vortex, the thugs genuinely believe a demon from hell has come to drag them down, and Jiamju can only curse her useless troops as their morale completely shatters, as the previously fearless, pain-numbed attackers drop their weapons and sprint for their lives. C watches the mass panic in stunned silence, and as her own subordinates urgently ask for orders, she realizes this battlefield no longer belongs to them, and wisely commands her forces to hold their ground and do absolutely nothing. Up above, our boy watches the fleeing insects with cold amusement, casually reminding them that since the curtain has risen, the actors aren't allowed to leave the stage, dropping a single terrifying command to stop right where they are. Instantly, the pitch-black shadows on the ground violently erupt, and a pale ghostly hand shoots out of the darkness to clamp onto a fleeing attacker's ankle, making the man shriek in horror as the unnatural grip stops him dead in his tracks. It squeezes with bone-crushing force to anchor him to the floor, and before he can even swing his weapon, dark purple tendrils spiral up his legs, while right next to him another massive shadowy limb sends a flailing thug rocketing high into the air. The rest of the Blackbone sect completely loses their minds, screaming at each other to run faster. But the darkness is everywhere, and dozens of pale clawed hands rapidly emerge from the abyss to drag them down. One catches an older attacker by the leg, violently yanking him upside down, while another glowing purple hand shoots up to wrap around a tattooed thug's throat, turning the courtyard into a chaotic slaughterhouse as the domain's limbs grab, crush, and tear the screaming men apart. Standing amidst this horrific symphony of screams, our hero's masked visage looks like a true god of death, and he delivers a cold, absolute decree: die right where you are. Following his command, a monstrous skull-embedded arm bursts from the shadows to snatch a fleeing attacker right by the face, and the trapped man's eye widens in sheer panic as the limb bulges with volatile energy, before his head is violently crushed with a sickening crunch, sending a massive spray of blood across the battlefield. Explosive shockwaves of dark energy detonate across the enemy ranks, blowing men apart in showers of gore, as the Blackbone elites are effortlessly decimated by the unseen, overwhelming force. C's eye widens in pure shock when a streak of black energy obliterates a squad right in front of her, prompting her masked subordinates to point frantically toward the source of the massacre, watching in sheer horror as a giant pale hand casually squashes a screaming thug's face like a grape. The domain shows zero mercy, tearing the remaining attackers limb from limb in a brutal display of power, a sight that leaves the Hyonal Pavilion assassins completely frozen as they realize they are way out of their league. At the center of the carnage, our hero commands the dying men to beg for their lives, mocking them to pray to the uncaring heavens as his giant constructs squeeze the breath out of them, and even erupt from the growing pools of blood to drag more victims down into the abyss. Manifesting a terrifying, jagged demonic grin, he declares that he has descended to answer the cries of the innocent, and with a casual wave of his arm, unleashes a massive circular shockwave of dark purple energy that whips past Jiamju, and completely shatters the blonde monster's sadistic confidence. The sheer scale of the power is enough to break anyone, but a scarred Blackbone sect enforcer, driven completely mad by the bloodbath, seethes with manic energy to rally a suicidal counterattack. The enforcer screams at his remaining men to charge forward into the darkness, but as C watches the shadowy mass rapidly spread to swallow their advance, she realizes her squad was about to get absolutely steamrolled by the sheer size of that mob, making our boy's terrifying entrance the ultimate clutch save. Her attendant asks if they should step in to help, but a familiar voice tells them it's unnecessary. C turns around and her eye widens in relief as Gyu, the twin buns girl, and the green vest swordsman step out of the shadows, safely regrouped, and she rushes over, incredibly thankful that her most loyal subordinates survived Jiamju's brutal assault. Wiping the blood from a fresh scar, Gyu admits he took a beating, but notes they only survived because the ruler of darkness arrived just in time. When the twin buns girl tries to charge back in to help fight the expert-level Jiamju, the pavilion master physically holds her back and tells her allies to trust him, because our guy isn't just a martial artist, he's a true, incomprehensible monster. As the dust settles, our boy stands atop the highest spire, radiating a suffocating purple aura, a display so terrifying that an onlooker realizes he hasn't even tapped into his true strength yet. The surviving assassins freeze in absolute awe, watching him silently survey the battlefield while his dark energy cascades over the rooftops like a waterfall. But the Blackbone sect isn't done yet, as a panicked defender spots their elite experts approaching, and three of them leap straight toward the spire, completely confident they have their target cornered. The lead attacker, a muscular brute with a claw gauntlet, winds up a vicious strike, which prompts the young master's aura to explode into a terrifying jagged silhouette. Unfazed by the literal raid boss standing before him, the brute boasts that he'll carve the intruder to pieces. But with a single effortless upward swipe of a purple energy blade, my guy shatters the claw and the arm attached to it. The brute just freezes, blood bubbling from his lips as his brain fails to process the hit, before his chest suddenly bursts open in a massive spray of gore to instantly end his run. Seeing the brute fall, another expert scoffs at his weakness and aggressively charges forward. Identifying himself as the Mantis Ghost Demon, he whips his chain scythe toward the spire and leaps through the air to deliver a confident flurry of slashes. But our hero simply releases a burst of dark purple energy and instantly obliterates the man into a bloody mist. Realizing they are completely outmatched in single combat, four of the remaining thugs desperately regroup and launch a coordinated assault from all sides. The masked figure doesn't even bother drawing a weapon. instead gathering a dark claw-like aura over his hand as he takes a single heavy step that freezes the ground beneath his boots. His eyes flare with lethal intent as he initiates a massive technique known as the Dark Cloud Void, and giant purple energy constructs erupt from the earth to crush the attackers like insects. The sheer scale of the blast pierces straight through the surrounding rooftops, leaving the surviving sect members to watch in absolute horror as their comrades are brutally torn apart. Desperate to regain control, Tiger Hunter Kong Jamu screams at his men to stop climbing the tower, ordering the surviving thugs to spread out and surround the monster instead of rushing in head-on. His strategy is simple: just buy time and stall until the intruder's inner energy runs dry. But our boy slowly turns his head, a single glowing purple eye piercing straight through the darkness. Completely ignoring the fodder below, he senses his true target nearby and locks straight onto Jiamju's presence. Before he can move, a muscular swordsman leaps down from above with a furious scream, demanding to know what kind of monster he's even looking at. My guy simply raises a hand swirling with dark energy and effortlessly catches the attacker by the throat, choking the life right out of him, making the poor guy's fading brain register him not as a man, but as a literal cosmic void of pure terror. The paralyzed thug realizes too late that he isn't fighting a human at all. While down in the courtyard, Gyu can only stare in shock as a colossal demonic face looms over the entire battlefield. Dark, jagged fragments of shattered energy rain down around them, leaving Jiamju panting and completely exhausted as her ultimate attack is effortlessly neutralized. She stares at the massive, shadowy hand dominating the foreground, whispering that this level of power is flat-out impossible, and watches helplessly as the pitch-black domain begins to spread across the dirt, slowly submerging the fallen bodies. She leaps backward to avoid the creeping shadows, but to her absolute horror, the dark substance starts reanimating the corpses, dragging withered arms up from the dirt. Gagging at the horrible stench like her nose is literally rotting off her face, she looks up at the roof spire where our boy stands, radiating an intense purple aura that completely dwarfs her. Her eyes widen in extreme shock, the sheer disbelief cracking her arrogant facade wide open. A horrifying realization strikes as the shadow of her terrifying master looms. This masked monster's aura rivals the incomprehensible realm of the very entity she serves. Gripping a splintered doorframe to steady her trembling legs, Jiamju tries to convince herself that she's finally crossed the wall into true superhuman territory. Enraged by her own creeping terror, she screams about the sheer amount of her lifespan she sacrificed for this dark power, and vows to slaughter the monster before massacring every single person who has ever looked down on her. But her unhinged rant is cut dead when a dark figure materializes directly behind her. And as she whips her head around in pure shock, our hero is already looming over her shoulder. His glowing purple eyes peer straight through her soul as he casually asks if he should call her by her true name instead. Say Yua. Panicking, she violently swings her arm backward, unleashing a massive wave of red energy to blast him away. The sheer force of the blast obliterates the surrounding courtyard and rips the wooden structure to shreds. Screaming in absolute fury, the blonde woman demands to know where he heard that name, but my guy just manifests as a towering ethereal purple shadow that completely dwarfs her, and calmly asks if she really thought he wouldn't know exactly who she is. Her arrogant facade finally shatters into genuine, sweating terror. She violently hurls a massive crescent-shaped energy blade to shut him up, only for our hero to instantly vanish and reappear right behind her shoulder, whispering her true name once more. He asks if she really thought burying her identity would somehow erase the mountain of sins she's committed. Instantly, the horrific weight of her past atrocities manifests as a horde of screaming, vengeful spirits clawing for justice. Her eyes flare a bloody red as she furiously questions his right to judge her evil deeds, but before she can finish the thought, a bare foot steps down onto the rippling dark surface of the domain. She turns sharply as the surroundings violently shift, and in a flash she finds herself completely engulfed in a swirling vortex of purple and white energy. A colossal eruption shoots skyward with our hero floating right at its center. From the oppressive dark void, he calls out her true name one last time, challenging her to defy him with every last drop of power she possesses. An invitation she answers with a furious, desperate roar, her hair blowing wildly in the demonic storm. She brings a massive red energy blade crashing down, screaming for an answer as the impact detonates into a swirling explosion that absolutely nukes the courtyard. Stepping menacingly from the flames, Jiamju scoffs at the very idea of facing judgment. She flares her crimson aura, roaring that he has absolutely no right to look down on her, but a chilling voice cuts right through her tirade, calmly counting out the number 1. Confused by the sudden interruption, she glances down at her clawed hand. To her absolute horror, she realizes one of her fingers has been cleanly severed without her even feeling a thing. Standing tall in the pitch-black void, our guy holds his hand up, blood dripping from his jagged, shadowy maw as he crunches down on the stolen digit and casually calls it a delicacy. Jiamju stares blankly at her bloody hand, a cold shiver running down her spine as she realizes her finger has been cleanly severed. But before she can even process the impossible, a foot wreathed in purple energy steps out of the shadows behind her, and our hero looms over her shoulder, his mask glowing as he casually asks if the neighbor's child she ate tasted just as good. He licks his jagged teeth, drinking in the terror radiating off his prey. Driven into a corner, the blonde monster snaps, her scarred face contorting in rage as she screams at him to shut up, and unleashes a massive wave of red energy directly at his head, blurring forward with blinding speed to follow up the assault. A violent burst of crimson light erupts across the battlefield, bombarding our hero with rapid energy spikes as he stands perfectly still. The blonde superior manifests a monstrous red energy construct to rain down a devastating barrage from above, cackling as she mocks his high and mighty attitude now that she has him completely overwhelmed. Throwing her arms up, she gathers a massive sphere of chaotic power and screams for him to die, pouring every ounce of her murderous intent into the blast. But my guy just watches the incoming strike completely calm beneath the blinding glare. Jiamju fully sends it, driving that rushing wave of destruction straight at our boy, and the attack violently impacts the courtyard in a massive fiery explosion that shatters the surroundings. But as the flames rise, our hero descends rapidly onto the battlefield, bathed in a blinding purple light. His glowing eye pierces through the smoke, glaring down with terrifying authority, and the sheer pressure of his arrival causes the nearby stone walls to crack and crumble. A secondary blast of pink and red energy rocks the area, and the blonde woman settles into a wide stance, looking back over her shoulder at the devastation. Jiamju stares intently into the settling dust, eager to spot a corpse, and as the smoke clears over the cratered courtyard, she wonders if the fight is finally over. Convinced of her victory, she bursts into arrogant laughter to mock him as a pathetic bastard who was all talk. She dismisses his grand title entirely, completely unaware of the dark purple energy gathering directly behind her, until our boy's glowing skull-like mask materializes right over her shoulder as he calmly counts 2. Her eye widens in sheer shock as her entire body freezes in place, before she whips around to drop into an aggressive stance and face him once again. Jiamju stammers in disbelief, certain she just watched him get crushed under the collapsing building. But the masked figure simply raises a bloodied hand to his face, his demonic aura suffocating the air around them. He taps his jagged teeth with a crimson-stained finger to emphasize his monstrous hunger, and her shock morphs into horror when she looks down to realize her own pinky is missing. Blinded by fury, she swings her massive red arm in a brutal downward strike, but the blow violently smashes into a purple energy barrier and stops dead in its tracks. The sheer force of his defense repels her backward across the dirt while our boy doesn't even flinch. Instead of counterattacking, my guy just stands there trembling, his white robes shaking as he violently chokes down his latest meal. Jiamju flinches in a cold sweat as the sickening crunch echoes across the dirt, and the sheer pressure of his dark aura shatters the air around them. The jagged maw on his mask opens wide to savor the taste before he calmly calls out his next target, number 3, her left index finger. She screams and staggers backward, completely broken as he reminds her of the innocent girls she slaughtered just to bathe in their blood. He flashes a terrifying manic smile, mocking her for crying so much over a measly 3 fingers, and the once arrogant superior can only pant and tremble uncontrollably as absolute fear finally consumes her. But that terror quickly snaps into desperate rage, her veins bulging as violent red energy crackles to life. She powers up with a feral scream, threatening to grind him into paste as her blonde hair whips wildly, and unleashes a massive barrage of crimson slashes from above. Yet our boy just stands there completely unfazed, letting the devastating strikes deflect harmlessly off his white robes. A normal martial artist would have lost their mind to this monstrous state by now, but her dark spells are barely holding her sanity together. It doesn't matter though, because as the masked demon takes a slow step forward through the swirling purple energy, he coldly promises that her total mental collapse is just a matter of time. Meanwhile, a safe distance away at the pavilion, the onlookers watch the battle unfold, bracing themselves as a massive red explosion erupts on the roof. C stands with her scrolls in hand, her single eye locked onto the chaos, and she quickly realizes our hero isn't just swiftly evading the barrage. Her masked attendant steps up to confirm it, explaining that he is actually letting the force of every strike flow into the floor. Each time the lethal red energy makes contact with his body, he absorbs the impact and flawlessly redirects the pressure straight down to crack the stone tiles right beneath his toes. The twin buns girl looks back in absolute awe, demanding to know what kind of insane principle could possibly pull that off. A heavily injured Gyu can only guess that he's using penetrating force in reverse, applying the subtle art of silk reeling force, so the masked demon can safely channel the devastating impact straight through his body and down into the dirt. This leaves the young lady completely lost, and she stares up at the red sky, desperate for someone to explain what any of that actually means. C's masked attendant humbly admits that despite her expertise in intelligence, she doesn't have a clue either. until the pavilion master herself steps in to simplify it, explaining that our boy has somehow synthesized the core essences of several different sects into his movements. C pictures our boy surrounded by the conceptual masters of every martial discipline, like he just downloaded their entire moveset. The observers are left utterly astonished because understanding a technique in theory and actually using it in combat are two entirely different beasts. The fact that he can flawlessly execute such a miracle in the middle of a chaotic deathmatch is terrifying, and the realization hits them hard. The Master of Dark Heaven has already leapt past the ultimate barrier to become a transcendent expert, all before his 20th birthday. Back on the battlefield, a manic smile creeps across Jiamju's scarred face as she mutters his name, staring at his purple-bathed silhouette as she questions what kind of monster he truly is. Losing the last of her sanity, she screams, her red eyes flaring with feral rage, but our boy's face just distorts into a jagged grin as he claims all 10 of her fingers as his own. He dismisses her artificial power boost as a cheap trick, and with a single deliberate step he instantly closes the distance, blurring past her heightened senses to loom right over her shoulder. Jiamju's eye widens in paralyzing terror as he ominously whispers the number 11. Manifesting his monstrous mask, So-yun holds a beating heart in his hand, and with a brutal squeeze he crushes it completely, splattering blood as he seals her fate. In the immediate aftermath of the clash, C sprints through the smoke-choked ruins of the courtyard, screaming for any sign of life, her voice cracking as she desperately begs for her scarred guard to answer her, tearing through the rubble in a blind panic while shouting his name, until sheer exhaustion finally forces her to a halt, leaving her panting heavily in the dark corridor as she weakly whispers for him. Meanwhile, deep within a surreal void of floating architecture, the twin buns girl realizes she's been trapped inside a vicious barrier formation that triggered upon Jiamju's defeat, and as she wanders the foggy, pitch-black corridors, a creeping despair sets in, making her lament that she'll die here without ever seeing Jung-ah again. Right before a mysterious voice calls out to her from the shadows, a sudden brilliant flash of light pierces the gloom behind her, revealing the exact person she thought she'd never see again, as Jung-ah literally spawns out of the darkness with a gentle smile and a lantern. She calmly reassures the trapped girl that the disorienting space is just how this kind of magic operates. But the twin buns girl can only stare back in sheer horror, completely frozen as she realizes her savior's eyes are glowing with an unnatural piercing gold. Jung-ah firmly grabs her hand, assuring the trapped girl that the rest of their forces have already evacuated, and she's the last one left. Before the girl with twin buns can even process what's happening, the golden-eyed woman yanks her forward into a dead sprint. The young girl's eyes go wide with absolute panic as she realizes her supposed savior is dragging her on a direct collision course with a massive stone wall. They close the distance in a breathless blur, and just as the girl braces for a bone-crushing impact, they burst right through the illusionary barrier, phasing past the solid rock and sliding to a sudden halt on the other side. The rescued girl can only blink in stunned disbelief, completely speechless as she realizes the terrifying maze is finally behind them. Back at the unrecognizable ruins of the command headquarters, C stares into the lingering gloom, wondering aloud if the suffocating darkness has finally lifted. But as she asks what kind of bizarre barrier triggered the second the blonde woman died, the golden-eyed attendant calmly assures her that the rest of their forces are safe before dropping a massive bombshell. The monstrous enemy isn't dead at all, and with our boy already hunting her down, they need to move before it's too late. A heavy boot splashes into a fresh pool of blood as the masked figure stands alone under the pale moonlight, his cold gaze sweeping over the scattered corpses of the thugs he just massacred. He stalks forward through the devastated camp to trace his prey's desperate retreat, only to find the scarred steward waiting for him at the mouth of a dark cave. Moments ago, the scarred steward pointed out the secret passage the blonde woman used to flee. Our boy's eyes widened in shock as he took in the mountain of slaughtered bodies piled beneath the stone wall, and he stared at the bloody symbol painted above them, while the man admitted the massacre was already done. Back in the present, the steward grimly explains that every single non-combatant in the camp was sacrificed to a forbidden sorcery, and the masked figure pieces the horrific truth together. She harvested hundreds of lives just to grant herself a temporary power boost. The scarred man lowers his head in regret and confesses that he too turned a blind eye to the sect's evil just to survive. Our boy just smirks, calling the belated guilt laughable. The scarred steward kneels in the dirt, bracing for his end as he admits his final stand is just an old man's whim. But the young master simply steps forward, brushing right past him in a flare of purple aura as he agrees that the gesture is entirely useless. Shrouded in darkness, he asks if such empty apologies could ever comfort the innocent lives lost, his face completely obscured by shadow as he tells the fallen victims to resent the heavens, the earth, and even him. In his previous life, he had simply sat idle, reading books and writing poetry while the world burned, seeking only to keep his own hands clean as he played his instruments and turned a blind eye to the suffering around him. And now here he stands, his face hidden behind a blinding white light as he commands the dead to curse the swordless one. His eyes flare a striking purple as a sudden rush of energy sweeps past, and as his figure seems to fade into an ethereal void, he finally admits his deepest regret: all the days he spent doing nothing at all. High above, thin clouds drift across a quiet night sky, while C sprints frantically through the dark streets below. She pushes herself to the absolute limit, finally skidding to a halt in an empty courtyard as she realizes the blonde monster's dark sorcery has successfully activated. Meanwhile, Jeonju makes her own terrified escape, knowing that the instant our boy crushed her heart, the fatal injury actually spiked her power and triggered a defensive barrier, allowing her to regenerate the destroyed organ and grow back every severed finger. Decades ago, she had sacrificed hundreds of lives and offered up decades of her own lifespan just to master this twisted regeneration, a price she never regretted. Sprinting into the night, Jeonju knows for a fact that if he catches her again, she is dead. That masked monster defies every law of martial arts, shrugging off her heaviest attacks like they were nothing, so she plans to lose him in the maze-like streets of Luoyang, relying on her instincts as a kid from the city's back alleys. But suddenly she freezes in her tracks, a wave of confusion washing over her as she questions her own inner voice. Was she really from Luoyang? Decades ago, she was actually raised in a remote mountain village, kneeling in the shadows far away from any urban streets. A sudden spike of pain rips through her skull as the conflicting realities violently clash, and she clutches her head while her vision blurs, realizing with mounting horror that her own mind has been tampered with. That mental fracture is quickly swallowed by pure, suffocating terror as the freezing darkness of the demonic domain floods her senses, and she screams in blind despair as giant spectral hands reach out from the void to claim her. The terrifying hallucination suddenly shatters, dumping Jeonju straight back into the pitch-black nightmare of his demonic domain, and she finds herself standing completely alone in the sprawling emptiness, realizing with a sinking dread that she is utterly lost. She grinds her teeth in mounting frustration, but her anger is cut short when a chilling voice drifts from the shadows to recite a grim poem about starving monks and desperate poets. Her gaze snaps downward to find our boy standing calmly in the gloom, where he finishes his dark monologue by asking why the wicked get to feast so heavily on the marrow of the innocent. The sudden materialization sends a violent jolt of panic through the blonde monster, and her eyes widen in pure terror as she registers the impossible figure before her. She stammers out a panicked threat, completely losing her mind over how this masked nightmare tracked her down so fast, but my guy just brushes off the hostility to casually ask her for directions to the main road. A predatory smile stretches across his face as he suggests they have a little chat about her dark business, prompting her to furiously demand who he thinks he is, setting the stage for him to finally drop her true name. He takes a slow step forward, his features completely swallowed by the shadows of his own suffocating aura, as the crackling purple energy flares to life around him, and the monstrous jagged-toothed mask locks its glowing eyes onto her, dropping the one name she thought was buried forever: Seiyua. While our boy corners Seiyua in the dark abyss, footsteps echo through the ruined aftermath of the battlefield, raising questions about what happens now that the Blackbone sect is gone. C and the Twin Buns girl discuss how the Sword House will likely seize all the wealth and land, and the Eye Patch woman turns to the young girl to ask if she truly knows who her master is, wondering aloud if Jung-ah is afraid of the terrifying monster they serve. The purple-haired girl calmly replies that she doesn't follow him just for protection. She serves the ruler of darkness because she wants to become exactly like him. Her chilling declaration interrupted as heavy footsteps suddenly pound against the dark ground. Jeonju violently lunges out of the darkness, making C flinch back in sheer panic, as both women stare in absolute disbelief at the monster's impossible arrival. The blonde superior looms over them, panting heavily with her mutated veins bulging and eyes glowing a sinister red, and furiously curses them out, but her mind has been completely shattered by the demonic domain, leaving her screaming for directions out of a non-existent back alley. While C stammers in utter confusion, Jung-ah quickly realizes the attacker's sanity is gone, narrowing her golden eyes as she carefully analyzes the erratic threat. C realizes the monster has already been entirely consumed by our boy's terrifying aura, but Jeonju just screams in absolute frustration and demands someone point her to the exit. Losing what little patience she has left, she raises her giant mutated arm high into the air and slams her massive clawed hand down to crush the defenseless pair into paste. Suddenly, a lantern hits the dirt as a voice shouts for them to get back. Spiked metallic gauntlets cross in the darkness, and Jung-ah steps in, her golden eyes flaring as she catches the fleshy scythe dead in its tracks. The monstrous expert glares back with manic fury, completely shocked that her lethal strike was just halted cold. C screams her sister's name in sheer panic, but the girl just tightens her iron grip on the writhing tentacle, and with one violent full-body yank rips the appendage right back. Jeonju shrieks in absolute agony, coughing up a mouthful of blood as the brutal counterforce tears through her body, while Jung-ah holds her ground among the shattered rocks, panting heavily from the sudden exertion. C frantically rushes to her side to check if she's hurt, totally baffled as to when she suddenly gained the inner energy to pull off a massive feat like that. But Jung-ah just flashes a confident smile, revealing that she hasn't gained a drop of energy. She's simply using her golden eyes to perfectly anticipate the strike. Down on the shattered rocks, the blonde woman's monstrous hand suddenly twitches, and she slowly drags her mutated frame back to her feet, her heavily veined face contorting in rage as she promises to kill them all. As the defenders brace themselves for another onslaught, the wild beast lunges right at Jung-ah, but the young maid simply steps forward into a firm combat stance and drives her massive metal gauntlet directly into Jeomju's torso with a fiery blast, the heavy gears of the weapon shifting into place as she follows through. Jung-ah unleashes an explosive barrage of downward punches, forcing Jeomju to take the full force of the brutal beating as she screams in agony. Watching the one-sided massacre from a distance, C is left in absolute awe, realizing that despite having no inner energy, every single one of her sister's strikes lands with perfect precision. The blonde woman desperately tries to maneuver out of the onslaught, but the young maid's movements are flawless, anticipating exactly what, when, and how every attack is coming, before she thrusts her heavy gauntlet forward with immense speed and lands a devastating blow directly to Jeomju's face that violently snaps her head back. Jeomju's red eyes widen in pure shock, completely unable to comprehend how a mere maid is pushing her to the brink under the terrifying glare of those piercing yellow eyes. She staggers backward and clutches her chest in agony, but quickly deduces that Jung-ah lacks the stamina for a long fight, hoping to just outlast her. Suddenly, a terrifying chill spikes down her spine as the bloody, monstrous visage of Yin So-yun flashes through her head, and she grits her jagged teeth with the grim realization that if she stalls any longer, the ruler of darkness is going to catch her. C watches in dead silence as the monstrous woman hesitates, before Jeomju spits a final curse of vengeance and turns to dash away at top speed. But before the expert can even take a step, giant pale hands erupt from the rocky earth, and one of the shadowy appendages snatches her right by the ankle. She stares down in sheer disbelief, gasping as the monstrous fingers clamp down like a vice to lock her in place. More glowing purple hands snake out of the darkness to wrap around her struggling body. Right as a chilling voice echoes through the void, it completely ignores the captive, casually asking Jung-ah how her little test of strength went. Jeomju snaps her head up to see our boy stepping out of the shadows, and he just gives her a calm, arrogant smile, completely unfazed by her screaming rage. Jung-ah immediately drops into a respectful bow to apologize for falling short, but So-yun reassures the two women that they've worked hard and earned their rest. C nervously murmurs her thanks, stealing a quick glance at him as she tries to wrap her head around the fact that this perfectly refined scholar is the exact same entity as the terrifying ruler of darkness. Their quiet moment is shattered when Jeomju furiously demands to be let go, struggling against her unseen restraints and threatening to chew every last one of them into pieces. This guy just turns his back on the screaming monster and decides that now isn't the right time for a chat. Jeomju flinches as the reality of her situation finally crashes down on her. Hopelessly trapped in the abyss, she drops to her knees to beg for her life, swearing up and down that she'll only do good deeds from now on. The monster even offers to become his loyal slave, sweating profusely in a pathetic bid to survive, but our boy just looks down at her from the shadows with chilling indifference. His eye flares with a menacing purple light as he asks if she seriously thinks those empty words are going to save her now. Out of options, the desperate expert pivots back to threats, screaming that she holds the Sword House bronze token, and warning him that if she dies, his own hostile brothers will personally hunt him down. So-yun doesn't even blink at the political threat, coldly telling her to let them try. Leaning in close, he declares that everything rotten in this world will ultimately be devoured by him, and with a violent spray of blood he finishes her off, coldly stating that she is no exception.